Sounds good. All right. Wonderful. Thank you. All right, so let's try this again. Morning, everybody. Welcome to our December quarterly meeting of the Maine Climate Council. Appreciate you all being able, or most of you being able to make it here in person. We do have some online participants, so David will try to help me remember that they're there because it's a little hard to see them from here at the podium. So what we're planning to do today is try to help all of us get to know one another a little bit better. As part of the idea of cramming us all into this room, trying to be in person. We are planning for some of our subsequent meetings to be done virtually. But we recognize that we spend a lot of time talking at you, giving you lots of presentations, really important information. But when we get to summertime and the working groups are delivering their recommendations to this council, it's great if you have some established relationships, you know one another, or sort of familiar with each other's expertise and interests to facilitate us trying to get through those recommendations to boil that down into the next 4-year plan. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a roundtable of introductions, and then we're going to go through the progress report, which is now ready today and will be shared with all of you and posted online. And we'll take a break. And then we're going to have a couple of little mini panels. And the idea with the mini panels is they'll start the conversation, but we'll also be welcoming input from the rest of you around the table on those topics. And then we'll wrap up with David walking us through some conversations about how we'll all work together moving forward. So with that, what I'm going to ask of each of you, I'm going to start to my right. And then, since you all know him, and what we're going to ask is for the returning members, we're interested in what new perspectives are you bringing to this climate planning process for this upcoming 4 years? Also, what kind of expertise and experience you think might be relevant for your fellow members to know about? And then particularly for our new members, we're interested to know, why did you agree to join the council? I think we tried to be fairly blunt with everybody that this does involve some work. It isn't just sitting at meetings and being talked at, particularly when summertime comes. You know, there's going to be some difficult choices to make and some hard conversations we might all need to have. Our returning members have lived through that. You knew what you were getting yourselves into, but for the new members, we want to know what interested you in joining us. And then 1 year from now, when we've finished updating the plan, how to you would you describe what success looks like? So again, who you are, what your expertise is that you're bringing to bear with the council, why you were willing to join us and interested in being part of this, and what does success look like for you when the plan is done. So with that, I'll turn it over to Pat.
Yes, I'll just say something quickly as well to compliment Melly is, for the benefit of the folks online, I'm going to be doing, just for these introductions, a little hello. So the camera in this room captures the back of your head. And so feel free to speak to the camera here as well. This will just be for the benefit of the online participants. We'll get rid of this once the intros are over. So Pat, sorry to have to be the guinea pig on this.
That's all right. Anna and Melanie said, sit right here. I know why. My name is Patrick Strauch. I'm the Executive Director of the Maine Forest Products Council. I bring just the ability to bring together a large group of people in the industry. We have over 350 member organizations ranging from single loggers and truckers to pulp and paper mills and sawmills, biomass energy plants, and about 8 million acres of dues-paying members. So it's a big tent, and that's, the council's been around for about 60 years. My background is in forestry. I have a couple of degrees in forestry, so somehow that qualifies me to be head of a large lobbying organization. But we're also about developing economic development and have been working in the last 7 years with regard to bringing new kinds of forest products into the state of Maine. And that's been a big effort of ours, along with a large collaboration of what's called the 4 Maine projects, Forest Opportunity Roadmap. So I'm here because in a lot of ways, climate change points to the importance of land and forest land and the importance of forest products. It's really an interesting time in our business to be thinking about all those dynamics. So that's why we're here. And success is meeting some of the objectives we've set. It's also strengthening and diversifying the forest bioeconomy is a big part of what I'm looking for. So there are a number of things we can do to help with that.
Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just gonna roll things along here.
Thank you.
I'll
I'll get less weird as we go. Yeah,
I'm glad I get to go second. Not have to try and come up with new things after all that everybody's gone. I'm Judy Canuso, I'm the Commissioner of Maine Fish and Wildlife. Our expertise is in fish and wildlife habitat and I think one thing maybe that's a little new and exciting for us is we just recently in the past couple of months created a new section within the agency, a habitat section. And that group will be focused on land acquisition, wildlife habitat and land use planning. So I do think we'll have some renewed, we definitely have some renewed enthusiasm and capacity to work on these projects. What does success look like? I think for me or for Fish and Wildlife, you know, when I was just talking to Pat about some of the issues that are facing us kind of long term. I think success looks like progress toward our 30 by 30 goals, particularly for fish and wildlife habitat. And for me, it's important that those areas are open and available to the public, so that we have access to those properties. Access needs to be challenge for us. And so, you know, additional lands for fish and wildlife habitat with access. And then, you know, for me personally, my constant mantra is to diversify the folks who are participating in fish and wildlife and outdoor recreation activities. And I think the more people that are participating in those activities, the more people are going to care about those activities and work to protect those resources. So for me, that's success.
Good morning, my name is Tom Abello. I am the governor's legislative director. I'm also her senior policy advisor on natural resources. Along with Commissioner Beal, I'm the co-chair of the Natural Working Lands Committee. And I think, what do I bring to the table? I think, you know, when we started this process in 2019 on natural working lands, it felt like we had a long road till the end of the administration, and there was a lot of time to make progress. We're now sitting about 3 years, just over 3 years left, and it feels like we haven't done very much in some ways. And so I think there's a lot of urgency, at least for, I feel that for our working group to make, continue to make incremental progress, but also try to find those levers where we can really jump on the 30% land priority, the 30% food priority, and forest carbon. So I'm looking forward to the next few months of the Natural Working Lands Group really sort of charting a course for more than incremental progress.
Good morning. My name is Matt Marks. I'm a principal with Cornerstone Government Affairs, but I represent the Associated General Contractors. AGC Maine is a statewide commercial construction trade association. I worked there as their CEO for about 14 years. And before that, I worked for a small family construction company that did property development and energy. I think from an AGC perspective, what has been most important about working here, like the work the council has done, but also what I hope the council does in the future, is try to figure out how we can integrate what our economy is sort of driven by some of the changes that we can effectively happen within this council here and how we work together. We found some great opportunities over the years to combine a sort of a new economy and a new direction for the industry. We're rebuilding, as you probably know. We've got a really strong growth over the last few years. We've recruited a lot more people. I think when I started here, we were short about 10,000 workers, and now we've actually exceeded that population before the recession. So it's an exciting time, but it's also changing the ways we build things, the codes, So for us, I think it's trying to find that integration between the private sector and trying to meet this sort of new age economy where we can do good things and build good structures.
Good morning, I'm Jessie Perkins. I'm the Executive Director of the Bethel Area Chamber of Commerce in Western Maine. This is my second term as a member of the Maine Climate Council. It's really an honor to be asked back again. I like to say I bring the perspective of small business, small towns. Of course, tourism is really important to us in our area as well. And, reminder that we can talk all day long about our, 1 point something million residents in Maine, but often we're vastly outnumbered by tourists. Also snow is very important to us. You may have heard that too. So we're really a big believer in that. Advice for new members, I would say, believe that we're actually making progress here. Believe that this can work. Considering the challenges that we faced in the previous 3 years with COVID, just hitting us right in the face immediately as soon as we kicked off. The staff that are supporting this and the facilitators that are driving this are really pretty amazing. And I'm really excited to see what the next 3 years can bring. If we were to envision what success looks like in another year, I would say continue to bring in any sort of past naysayers, people you never would have thought would have gotten involved, because this should ultimately lead to everybody being more forward thinking, more comfortable, more things should be more affordable, and we just kind of have to get over that hump. And if we can keep sending that message, then there's no reason that everybody shouldn't want to get involved. So really an amazing process.
Thanks, Jess.
My name is Jim Brooks. I work for SAPI. I bring many years of experience working with climate change issues. Actually, going back into the 90s after the last Clean Air Act was adopted by Congress. In fact, when I started working on climate issues, I had dark hair, and then we get sad there, I turned white. I recognize the challenges, having worked on action plans and implementing programs in the past. It's real difficult. My company is ecstatic that I'm participating in this. They see these issues as sort of part and parcel to the future of success of SAPI and the sustainable future. And I'm real glad to be back in the policy world. Thanks for inviting me.
Jim.
Morning, my name is Jeff Crawford. I am the Bureau Director of Air Quality at the Maine Department of Environmental Protection. Like Jim, I've got a long history in dealing with climate change and more particularly mobile sources, which is why I'm on the transportation work group. Like Jim also, I had dark hair and I had a lot more of it when I first started. Kind of an old hand at mobile source issues, going back to the early 90s with our first adoption of the low emission vehicle program. And what I'm most familiar with is a regulatory approach. I mean, we are a regulatory agency. What I'm able to bring to the table is a knowledge of regulatory programs and also programs in other states and jurisdictions. We work closely with states throughout New England, Mid-Atlantic, and some of the West Coast states. My idea of success for this endeavor is, like some other folks have mentioned, to identify and implement some programs that make some real measurable progress in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And I think there are definitely some opportunities that we can take advantage of in the transportation sector.
And as we're going, I just want to make sure the online folks, I'm seeing some chat saying they're not seeing this camera. Do you know what's going on there, Molly? Well, let me see. Just give me one quick second. Just set that. If you want me to drop the slides, but that may make it easier.
Now they can see.
Now they can
Okay.
see.
David,
Yes,
could we also, for those of us who are somewhat hard of hearing now?
ask folks, speak
Yeah,
a little
we're
louder.
speaking to the camera as opposed to the room,
Yeah, yeah.
except Jesse, you did awesome.
Right, so your inner thespian, your inner like stage voice, bring that out. Deborah.
Hi, I'm Deborah Elwood. I am the president and CEO of the Maine Community Foundation and really thrilled to be here. The Maine Community Foundation Board recently voted to declare that climate would be a core initiative for the organization, which means we'll bring the full muscle, all of the various things that the Community Foundation can bring to the table to really address this issue. And we'll just have a few initiatives like this. So this is one of them, and they're very, very excited about this. So I'm really thrilled to be asked to be on the council because we're really eager to have philanthropy be part of the solution, but only in partnership with other sectors. So that's why I'm really thrilled to be here. Success, I think, I understand that we're going to be updating the plan. That is a critical piece of success, I think, and I'm just thrilled to see so many clear indicators. So just some real progress and some of the clear indicators that have already been outlined. I'm really thrilled to be here.
Morning, Amy Landry. I'm the Executive Director of the Androscoggin Valley Council of Governments, also in Western Maine. So I think my role is really not only representing local governments. We're a regional planning organization that, you know, has a long history working with our municipal governments and land use planning, comprehensive planning, transportation planning. So how we are able to engage our municipal governments in what does this mean when we talk about climate change? Our role has really most recently been with the Community Resilience Partnership, which we've been able to educate many small communities on what we mean when we talk about resiliency. I think we've come a long way in a short period of time, but there certainly is a lot more education for municipal governments to have on what this means, in addition to, oh, I can get a grant to put a heat pump in the town office, right? So, you know, that's our role. I think I'm also here to represent regional governments. We're one of 10 regional planning commissions that work directly with government and planning. So how we can, as regional organization, advance the work of the Climate Council. I think success for us would be true engagement at all levels of government into the process. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Kessler, and I am a state representative from South Portland. I represent part of South Portland and a little bit of Cape Elizabeth. And I am one of the 4 legislative members of the council. So the expertise and experience that I am bringing to it in my career, I am an energy auditor. I've been working in the field of weatherization and HVAC for the past 14 years. So I've been in over 1,000 homes, from mobile homes to mansions, and know every nook and cranny. It's not pretty out there. I've worked with every population that we have in the state of Maine. I really want to bring my professional expertise in that realm to the work that we do here. I also serve on the Energy, Utilities and Technology Committee, which I have for the past 5 years. So I have a pretty deep understanding of the policy piece and also the sausage making piece of the legislature. So I want to help bring that all together to create a successful product here. And the vision of success that I would like to see is that the work that we do is really going to help the people in Maine that need it.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Francis Eames. I'm the Executive Director of the Maine Labor Climate Council. We are a coalition of 20 labor unions here in the state of Maine, and we work closely in coordination with the Maine AFL-CIO and the Maine Building and Construction Trades Council, which represent over 40,000 workers in our state. And I'm tremendously excited to be here, be part of the Maine Climate Council. It's my first term. I'm taking over from Matt Schlogum, who many of you know, sat on the last term for labor. And, you know, I'm tremendously excited for this work. We think about climate every day in our organization, and our whole reason for being is to help the labor movement develop its vision and plan of action on climate. And like the why I'm here, I'll just tell a really quick story because I think it illustrates and touches on some of the themes that folks shared around how we enlarge the coalition of who's fighting for good climate policy and action. So that some of you might have paid attention to the legislative fight around offshore wind, and we have a long way to go to see that happen and happen responsibly here in Maine. There's a massive opportunity if we get it right and scale this over time. And the real opening shot was last session, working on a couple of bills that ended up really moving us forward as a state and putting into statute a lot of the good work that happened with the offshore roadmap. And the thing that stuck out to me and kind of what is the thing that drives me forward every day, why I'm here, is we had a great public hearing on one of the bills, you know, over 5 hours, had testimony from dozens and dozens of union members, one of whom I remember very starkly said, I don't know if I even believe in climate change. I think the climate varies naturally, but I think offshore wind is a tremendously exciting technology. This port, if it happens in Searsport, is 15 minutes from my house. I could drive there every day, come home to work, see my family for a whole career. I want to help be part of this movement. That to me is like exactly why I do this work. There's a whole group of untapped people, organized and unorganized, that we can bring into this. And at the end of the day, I look at all the work that we're doing here as a climate council is technical and policy for sure, but we're transforming our entire economy. Like that is a Herculean effort. We need everybody that we can get in this fight. And so it's not either we do good policy work or we organize and build coalitions. It's like two can work together. And I think offshore wind was a good example of when we brought in with good policy who's fighting for this, we can actually make more progress together. So I'm excited to keep doing that together in the building space. You know, we work with the teachers union, with nurses who are organized, with our state employees. Like there are folks who, you know, beyond construction workers have a stake in seeing like healthier, more energy efficient buildings and infrastructure. And so success to me is like us having a broader shared analysis as a group that like the policy work that we do can influence who sees themselves in climate work. And if we make it work for working people, we can actually move this forward more expeditiously. So excited to be joining this and learn from you all. Thanks.
Good morning, I'm Bob Baines. I'm a commercial fisherman from Spruce Head. New to the council, I'm taking the place of Patrice McCarron. He's the executive director of the Maine Logsmen Association. I've been a longtime member of the Maine Logsmen Association as well as a number of DMR councils that I can't seem to get away from. And I think everyone understands the importance of commercial fisheries in the state of Maine and the coastal communities in the state of Maine, how important that is to them. I'm here on the council to hopefully bring that voice to this table because being on the coastal and marine working group, there was only 3 fishermen that group. Obviously the only fisherman at this table. And I want to make sure that what policies come forward are meaningful, practical, and doable. Maine lobster industry and the fishing industry is facing offshore wind, which is huge, whale rules, a measure increase. So we've got a lot going on that is directly or indirectly affected by climate change. So getting to participate in this and bring my voice to this and the perspective of the fishing industry, I think is hugely important. That the policies that will move forward will be beneficial to the coastal communities and the fishing community and not burdensome. I guess the other reason why I'm on this council is because Anna asked me to. And I have trouble saying a year from now, I know I'll be more informed. And I hope that I will be able to bring the perspective of the fishing industry to this council as well. Thanks, Bob.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amari Beji. I work at the Maine Environmental Education Association. I do policy work there. I also share my time as a student at Northeastern University, and I study political science. This is my first term on the Climate Council, and I'm hoping to continue in the great work of Anya Wright, who was the previous youth representative. I come from a background of youth engagement, environmental education and climate education. In high school, I did some stormwater remediation work in the Penobscot. I did that with some peers in my high school, and now I work on legislation that centers climate education and environmental education as well. And I think that is the primary reason why I joined, is to really center climate education, where the climate crisis has such an intergenerational justice piece of it. And for that reason, it's really important to have climate education so that youth can see themselves in this work as well. I think that also dovetails into what I define as success in the next year and this next term, especially coming from someone with identities that have historically been excluded from environmental and climate conversations, really ensuring that December 1st of next year, we deliver a plan that all Mainers can see themselves in.
Thanks, Mark.
Hi, everybody. My name is Susie Arnold. I'm a senior ocean scientist at the Island Institute, where I also direct our Center for Climate and Community. This is my first full term on the Maine Climate Council, when Andrew Pershing, who was the previous appointee for expertise in marine science, was what left the Gulf of Maine Research Institute. I took his place, so this is my first full term on the Climate Council. I also have co-chaired the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee the last round and this round with Ivan Fernandez here and Steve Dixon. And I also sit on the Coastal and Marine Working Group. So I work at the Island Institute. I've been there for 11 years. I'm a graduate of the University of Maine. Obviously my expertise is in marine biology. I think folks are pretty well versed with the threats facing the Gulf of Maine and the rapid rate of change that we are seeing. So obviously, raising that awareness is a huge priority of mine. I think as far as what I would see as success after the next plan comes out, I think from my perspective, we've heard a lot about hope recently. Some people are in agreement with the concept of hope. Some people think that it's like a fleeting feeling, not actionable. I stand by the concept of hope and actually think it is a science in and of itself. It is not just wishful thinking and optimism, and it's actually very actionable. There are three components of hope. One is goal setting, but one is agency thinking, and the last is pathways thinking. So I see the climate action plan as that goal setting part of hope, and I see everyone here's role is part of the agency concept and the pathways concept of hope. It's bringing agency to the people who then have to enact that plan, and it's providing them with the steps to achieve the goals in that plan. So my vision for success for the next action plan would be that it provides Mainers with hope and a pathway to achieve the goals that are in the plan.
Good morning, everyone, but I shouldn't look at that. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ivan Fernandez from the University of Maine in the School of Forest Resources, Climate Change Institute, the School of Food and Agriculture. I am also the co-chair, one of the co-chairs with Susie and Steve of the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee, and I'm on the Natural and Working Lands Committee with several people in the room. My sort of expertise is as a soil scientist and biogeochemist, and I've worked on climate change and air pollution and ecosystem effects for many decades. I'm trying to remember our assignment. Success to me, I think the key word is momentum. And I say that because I'm tremendously honored to be part of this group and to be part of the action plan development. And I've lived through and been working on climate change in the state for a long time. So I've lived through various phases of action and inaction. And some parts of that are not pretty. And some parts of that we still pay for today. So it's incredibly important that we maintain momentum on solutions, not only in mitigation. Our Rhodium group just came out with a report, I think yesterday, that we're on track as a planet to reach 2.8 degrees warming. So that's a far cry from the 1.5 ideal target. So we have a lot of work to do in mitigation, even though we're beginning to see those solutions come on board. And even more so on, I think, resilience and adaptation, a plan that implements a lot of new technologies that are better than the ones we have now, even though there's lots of resistance to the transition. So transitions are hard. And we can do a lot of good things. We can develop a plan that everyone can see themselves in. We can drive the economy. We can make our air cleaner while we're doing this. But there's a lot going on in the world, and to maintain that momentum is going to be extremely challenging. And so part of what we do in the science side is to be sure that the best available science is available to all of us as we do our work. Yes, sometimes it's, or almost always, it's somewhat of a downer. And yet if those realities didn't exist, we wouldn't be in this room right now. So that's why we're here, but there's a tremendous amount of positive that's happening. So I'm honored to be part of it. And now you can move that.
There we go, get my steps in.
Good morning, my name is Gary Lamb, I'm new to the council. Honored to be here as a representative from Maine Municipal Association. I've been in municipal government for about 2 decades now. In the previous century, I had a life as a wildlife biologist, a couple of degrees in that. I guess the thing that intrigues me here is the habitat concerns about both wind and solar, whether it be onshore or off, are very real. And I'm on the energy working group, and this one graph tells me that a year from now, I hope that the problem that is listed here on days where there's no sun and no wind, we need to fix with other sources of energy that I hope a year from now we're all more comfortable about by that time. And just one other plug, since we have legislators in here, I'm sorry, I'm a bit of a policy and a political nerd, but how about no more concept draft bills? Future legislative activity. Thank you, and I wanted.
Good morning, I'm Heather Johnson. I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Economic and Community Development. And one of the things that I'm here kind of trying to help think through is really thinking about how we drive economic value and development in climate goals. And so there's some logical intersections, and other people have already talked about it a little bit about those aren't mutually exclusive. And sometimes they get talked about as exclusive things and maybe even at odds. But for Maine, I think there's real opportunity to meet our climate goals and our economic goals together by driving kind of global solutions. And we might be able to even accelerate both plans by kind of keeping them connected. So I think there's real opportunity to work toward economic growth and global solutions for climate, not just even Maine solutions. I think there are ways for us to drive kind of global solutions, and we've seen that start already. So looking forward to doing more of that as we go.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amanda Beal. I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. And as Tom Abello said, I'm co-chairing the National Working Lands Working Group, which is a real honor. We have a great group. We've had a couple of meetings already in the past several weeks. And we've got Jody Sapphire here, who's our facilitator and going to make sure that we get a lot of good work done. So I'm excited about the conversations we have ahead of us. We have a lot of work ahead of us over the next few months, but I think based on the last time around, I have a lot of faith that we're going to come forth with some good recommendations that will really set us on a good course. The other thing I would just say is that, I see from my perspective in our department and other natural resource agencies as well, that climate change impacts everything that we touch and do. And I know I've told the story before, but I've heard enough people in the room that I can say it again. But the first park ranger meeting that I went to, manager meeting that I went to in 2019 in this job, I had staff telling me that it's really hard on morale to not have the tools and resources to be the kind of stewards that they want to be. And so, I'm really motivated by that, and by making sure that we have the tools and resources, as do working in the natural resource industries, to be successful. And so that's why I'm here. And what I see as success is really, on the near term, just elevating the voices and the expertise that are on the National and Working Lands Working Group, and making sure that we have a good process to do that. So
Hello, my name is Sam Roy. I'm Natural Hazards Planner with the Maine Emergency Management Agency. I'm also a faculty fellow at the University of Maine, where I've received 3 different degrees in urban climate sciences. This is my first appointment. I'm with the Community Resilience Working Group, taken over from Ann Fuchs, who's my division director at MEMA. The reason why I'm here is because of the exacerbating impacts of climate change on natural hazards. You may know that this year has been a banner year. Unfortunately, for flash flood warnings for the state, we received 4 different disaster declarations within the span of 8 months. And you may recall that the 3 years prior to this were drought years. So we're seeing an extreme swing in conditions that really impact our communities. As a natural hazards planner, I work closely with communities to ensure that they're identifying these types of vulnerabilities that exist, the capabilities that they have in order to reduce their risks, and mitigation strategies, mitigation projects that work to reduce their long-term risks. Also wanted to note that I'm here also to make sure that the members of emergency management, first responders, also have a piece of the pie here. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Good morning, I'm Kathleen Neal. I am the Senior Director of Policy and Partnerships at Maine Conservation Voters, where one of the things I get to do is to convene almost 40 statewide public health, environmental, and climate action organizations in Maine's Environmental Priorities Coalition. I'm also returning as the co-chair of the Buildings, Infrastructure, and Housing Working Group, along with this guy. And I think that's a really perfect entry for a lot of people, because we all have firsthand experience of buildings. We've all been in buildings that are too warm, too cold, too expensive, too far from the places that we need to be. It's a great entry point to really make the impacts of climate change and of climate solutions concrete for Maine people. I think that's a key part of the success that we are pursuing together, is making sure that our work makes sense and is clear and comprehensible to Maine people. And equally important, that our work reflects the experience and the insight and the priorities of Maine people. One of the things that I am really excited to bring to this work again is that ability to be a translator, to make sure that what we're saying makes sense outside of this room, and that what's happening outside of this room makes its way in here, so that we have that feedback loop. We're doing this work not just as a council, as individual organizations and coalitions, but as a statewide community. So really looking forward to working with them.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Michael Stoddard. I'm the Executive Director of the Efficiency Maine Trust, an attorney by training. I spent about 15 years as an advocate for nonprofit organizations working on clean energy policies around New England. That included participating in several climate action planning processes, one in Connecticut in 2003, one with Jim in 2004 here in Maine, and then again last time I was on the Climate Council here, so have some experience with going through these planning processes. I've been the director of Efficiency Maine since 2010. Efficiency Maine plans and administers the energy efficiency programs in the state. That includes market-based programs for weatherization of residential homes. We manage the funds from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative called RGGI, which we use for a variety of things, including weatherization, heat pumps. Beneficial electrification programs have been a lot of our focus for the last several years. So that is primarily looking at putting heat pumps in to displace old fossil systems. And we continue to do that and have had some really robust programs, and that looks to be something that we're going to be continuing to do for the next decade. So we're very excited to have that role. We also, in recent years, have introduced electric vehicle issues to part of our portfolio. So we manage the EV rebates for the purchase of qualifying electric vehicles. And then in partnership with the Maine DOT and the governor's offices, we help administer the EV charging infrastructure plans in the state. So we're very involved in the implementation of some of these mitigation strategies. I'm the co-chair of the buildings work group with Kathleen. Did I say chair? Co-chair. Sorry. And then also sit on the energy work group and the transportation work group. And I thought Amanda put it nicely. I feel like one of the biggest responsibilities is just facilitating and ushering that process so that we can get the best product out of there and hear all the different voices and consider all those perspectives and all the wisdom and expertise that is brought through those work group processes. You know, I think building codes is going to be an area where we didn't get a lot of work. We didn't make as much progress last time as we could this time. So I think that's going to be an important focus looking forward. And then really just building more and more awareness. Somebody said it earlier, these things are working, but we really have to scale them up massively and quickly. And that's where I hope we can use this work group process to build more support for that. Finally, I would say that sometimes we ask ourselves why little old Maine should be spending so much time and effort and trying to focus on what we can do. And I would just point out that it's not just the greenhouse gas emissions that we can mitigate here, but we, in some cases, can lead the country in showing the way forward. And we're certainly getting some recognition for that right now on what we're able to do with heat pumps. And so I think that's part of what motivates me to keep going and pushing and trying to push the envelope, because I think we can really punch above our weight here and we can show folks how you can transform these marketplaces so that there is more hope and there is a path forward that everyone can participate in.
I'm Joyce Taylor. I am the chief engineer at Maine DOT. I've been in that position about 9 years, have been there about 25 years. Was the first stormwater engineer in the state of Maine, working for DEP at the time. So I've been chasing water for a long time. I would say, you know, DOT's primary mission is public safety and making sure people are safe on our system. And we are seeing some tremendous impacts to our system, in particular inland. And so I always want to make sure we remember that we're having inland impacts. And we lost some culverts this year, and we lost some culverts during the drought years unexpectedly, and it causes great inconvenience. I've testified before at the Transportation Committee in the legislature on bridges. Everyone gets a little wigged out about bridge safety. And I'll tell you, I don't, because we will post or we will close that bridge and keep you safe. Although I've had to explain a few things to this guy. I will
Not just
say-
recently.
But I will say what does keep me up at night, and this is what I tell the committee, is culverts failing, slopes failing. Because people cannot see undermined pavement. People, for the life of me, I hope you all learn one thing: do not drive through water if you can't see the ground, please. I say it all the time. We've been fortunate, no one's died. Seriously, we've had people drive into the hole in J, or try to. People are, they're just so determined to get where they want to be. But we really have an opportunity, I think, for a win-win here. We've recently, Bruce will talk about it, got $27 million for aquatic organism passage, which means we're going to replace a whole bunch of culverts that could fail, make them resilient for our public, and allow fish passage. And I think, there's a lot of that win-win opportunity. I will just say this one thing. I recently this summer, right where Vermont was having their big flooding event, all of the chief maintenance engineers for every DOT in the country came to Portland for a meeting. I was asked to speak, and I actually chose the climate topic as my topic. And I said to them, you don't have to believe in climate change, but how many of you believe climate's changing? Every state in the country is counting climate as a risk item, because we all have to report our risk to Federal Highway. And so I think success for me is to sort of depoliticize this whole issue, because those of us who are on the ground trying to implement to protect people, it's not a political issue, it's a safety issue. And so that's sort of the lens that I come from and sort of what I bring to the table.
Thanks, Joyce. Commissioner.
Hi, I'm Bruce Van Noren, Commissioner of the Department of Transportation. Jeff, when you were talking, say we're a regulatory agency or DEP. We're a capital project delivery agency. We build stuff. And 2/3 of what we do is focused around that. And this whole thing, by the way, you can see why I put Joyce, as working, you should be on my right hand actually, on this stuff, because she's so good. I've been with the department since 1994. I'm a engineer by training, surveyor, lawyer, spent over 20 years up at the State House. So yes, as my wife would say, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I guess this is it. It is a great honor and privilege to do this and represent the 1,600 great people that I get to work with. We do think in terms of a system. We have a transportation system, and I don't have, Jason, to your point about your electrician that just says this is going to be great. But if we can responsibly site a wind port and actually change the economy and environmental future of Maine. I mean, that's how important that is. We put out hundreds of projects a year, and yes, last year, well, we haven't got the final numbers, but last time it was 93% on time delivery. Not that we're counting, but yes, we are. But with all those projects that we do, 8,800 miles of roads, 2,700 bridges, 36 airports, 21 transit providers, 1,200 miles of active track, and a Maine State Ferry service, Anna. With all that, the most important thing that I will ever work on, if it can happen responsibly, would be a wind port. Because it actually has the opportunity to be a game changer for the long term. So success for us is we always talk about a phrase that I use all the time is we try to turn clouds into boxes. In other words, discussion like this, ideas, plans, they're a little bit cloudy, right? They're trends, and you can set goals. Those are kind of definitive, but then the actual action items to get there has to be translated to a deliverable project. And DOT stays squirmy until we know, what do you want to build? What do you want to build? So that's what we bring to the table. We'll keep focusing on that. That doesn't mean we don't know how tough the discussion is, how tough the debates are, the issues, but ideas. We can't build ideas, concerns, and issues. We can build projects. And so working with all of you success to me would be, we got more planned stuff that I can tell you over the next 6 years, we're going to turn into a project. So look forward to working with all of you, and thanks for everything you do.
Hi, my name is Dr. Terry Fox. I am the Maine CDC director. And what do I bring to the table? I am also a trained engineer, but probably not that great of an engineer because I do not do engineering.
I'm not that great of a lawyer.
I love engineers. With that being said, I am a board certified internist and I practice in internal medicine and primary care. Other experiences and lens that I can bring to the table is that I'm also a trained medical epidemiologist with both real world experience in chronic disease epidemiology as well as infectious disease epidemiology. And what I, as an internist, as a provider, as a medical epidemiologist, and a trained engineer, I think what I love about all of this is the idea and concept of systems thinking and how do we work across the level of expertise in this room as evidence of that. How do we work across these different sectors to understand what those gaps may be, what those strengths may be, and then how do you address it? So strengthen the strength, fill in the gaps, right? And so I love that concept with multiple layers of contingency plans and fail safes. What I also bring to the table is I bring the visibility and expertise of the Maine CDC. And so those are not, that's not my expertise or my strengths, but it's my office strengths and I bring all those scientists with me. What I see as success is if we can continue this, because I know there's discussion, there's already work in this realm, but if we can continue to connect those dots and then connect it to the health of the individual, to the community, to the population, to the public, I see that as a success in the next year or 2 years or 3 years or 5 years or forward. And I also think it's important if I can, as the Maine CDC director and with my team behind me and with the folks in this room, use and emphasize using public health as a vehicle to identify, to survey for these health concerns, right? To identify them, to address them, because there are impacts on the health of a population, on the community, as well as the individual, right? Real world impacts. And if I can bring visibility to that in any way in the solutions and even in the systems that we set up, such as surveillance systems, then I can see that as success as well. Thank you.
Morning, everybody. I am Dan Brennan. I am the Director of Maine Housing, otherwise known as Maine State Housing Authority. I've had the pleasure of being on this council from its inception. I want to talk a little bit about who we are at Maine Housing and how we relate to the work here at the Climate Council. So Maine Housing is really two things in one agency. First and foremost, we're a bank. We are a $2.5 billion bank that provides mortgage financing for people to get their first-time home buyers. And then also we provide mortgage financing to developers to build affordable housing and apartments. So we're a big bank, but then we also administer state and federal funding at a number of different levels, primarily as it relates to what we're doing today. Funding from the Department of Health and Human Services for their fuel assistance program, the Department of Energy for the weatherization program. We also use other state and federal funding for home repair, all about the people who are currently in their homes, helping them do that. We work very closely with Michael at Efficiency Maine, Dan at the Governor's Energy Office, with Hannah at GoPIF. We're a good cohesive team and helping out people that are in their houses. Housing is a big deal in Maine. One of the beautiful things right now is we don't have to make the case that affordable housing is a big issue. Everybody knows that now. And I think we're also getting to the point where the climate issues, we don't have to make that case anymore. At least I hope we're past that. Success, I'm with Joyce. Depolitization, I didn't even say that right. You know what I'm trying to say. We're going to have a new administration in a few years. This effort was a tremendous leadership by Governor Mills and by Hannah. But what we're doing here, we may or may not get that level of support from the next governor. We don't know, but we have to keep this going. So my horizon is not so much this administration in the next 3 years, but it's the rest of my career and the rest of my agency's lifetime in terms of how we are helping people in their housing situation. So I'm going to be talking a little bit later today about implementation. We are in full-blown implementation, and it's an exciting place to be. Thank you.
Hey there. Now you can tell me if not. I think I'm Kate Dempsey. I'm with the Nature Conservancy, our state director. The theme here on this row is I used to be in affordable housing when I began my career. So we're all shapeshifters. I'm going to start with success because I've been with many of you all this whole time. It's been wicked fun. So what I'm focused on as elements of success is building on what you were saying, demonstrating that Maine people and nature are benefiting from our actions together, and that nature can be part of the solution to our biggest challenges. And I'm really committed to this year's process being even more comprehensive, bringing a diversity of voices in, building upon the equity subcommittee's recommendations. And I love what Susie said, so I want to emphasize the use of social science in our plan. we can keep talking about what climate is doing to our world, but if people aren't seeing themselves, as you said, in it, we're gonna lose. So let's use the best social science out there to bring Maine people together. So what the Nature Conservancy is focused on is resilient and connected ecosystems, so lands, waters, ocean, and integration of resource users, municipalities, state, tribes, federal agencies, youth, into making those decisions about where we make our biggest investments. And as I was saying, and Dan said, you know, I think it's really important this year to think beyond 3 years from now, so that we're seeing everyone in Maine, whether you're in Jackman or Stonington, seeing that the work we've done together is gonna make a difference. We joked one day in a meeting, it wasn't a joke, it's like the road blows out in Jackman and you are driving 120 miles round trip to work, and that's just not acceptable for Maine people. And so I just think being able to tell those stories of what we're doing together is so incredibly important. So let's get on with it.
Okay.
Commissioner.
Good morning. My name is Patrick Kelleher. I'm the commissioner at the Maine Department of Marine Resources, where I have been in that role for 13 years and have the privilege of leading a really incredible team of scientists, marine policy experts, and law enforcement individuals. That's what I bring to the table, frankly, is the people that I have working for me. Bob Baines talked about some of the challenges, and he's spot on. I think at the end of this, and what we're always looking for is resiliency, right? Coastal resiliency from an infrastructure standpoint is critically important, right? We're seeing that threat with rising waters all of the time. But fishery resiliency is critical. We have declining stocks. We have issues related to shifting stocks. We have biotoxins that we've never seen before. So we have a public health aspect as well, all driven by climate. So whether you believe in climate change or not, the climate's changing. And I have the challenge of interacting with 20,000 license holders who see that challenge, see that change every day. But as Bob said, it's like, how do we find the balance to strike to ensure that we have economic resiliency while we maintain resiliency for our stocks? So I'll stop there.
Good morning. I'm Noel Bonham. I'm the state director for AARP in Maine. We have 200,000 members in the state, and we represent older adults in the state. First of all, I have to say this is such a great idea, having these introductions, because I have such a better appreciation for who my colleagues are around this table, and I think it's a great idea. So thank you for doing that. But now that it's my turn, I'm like, okay. Why did I return to the Climate Council? This is my second term, because I saw just how sincere and how much work went into putting the last plan together, and how much work went in by this body in terms of really trying to sincerely do the work that needs to get done, and how inclusive the process has been last time. And so I'm really excited to kind of do more and help take it to the next level. I also have a lot of confidence in what this body can achieve. And so that's why I kind of returned, because I think we can do a lot. And I also think it's important to represent the voices of older adults in the oldest state. In this conversation, it's very important. We belong to a culture where the minute you get older, you are expected to disappear and not show up and not speak. And because then when you start speaking up, you become the creaky wheel. And so it's really important to have the voice of older adults in this conversation, how climate change impacts them directly and indirectly. And also to, again, going back to what I said, like though we are in the oldest state and older adults make up for the largest voting demographic in the country, in the United States, they are not represented. And so how do we really bring that voice here, particularly around things that may be hidden or sometimes where there might be unintended consequences in the work that we do. What was the last one? Success to me, actually kind of going to piggyback on what Amara and Joyce said in terms of, I feel like there's no person left behind and, from the work that we do, we keep that in our mind, that will be very successful. And we can do that only when we depoliticize, this work as much as we can. Thank you.
Morning, everybody. My name is Judy East. I'm the Bureau Director for Resource Information and Land Use Planning at the Department of Agriculture, Conservation and Forestry. I serve as the co-chair of the Community Resilience Working Group. We shortened the name this time, which is a lot easier. And I guess what I bring this round is having participated in the last round and developing connections across the state at the local, regional, and statewide level to tackle regulatory, financial, technical assistance needs, especially of municipalities. I served for 17 years at the regional level in Washington County and then with the Land Use Planning Commission. I think that gives me a very good understanding of what deeply rural Maine is facing with respect to climate. And another thing that I bring working for the Bureau is an exceptional staff of scientists and policy and permitting individuals. I am so impressed on a daily basis with the staff that I have within the Bureau. So I just had to shout that out. Success for me, we're tasking ourselves to come up with measures this time of what resilience looks like. And that's not going to be easy to do. But I think if we can even once have a municipal official or a nonprofit or what have you, a community member say, after some big one hits, because as Sam said, we got 4 big ones inland last year, and the Hurricane Sandy scenario is not out of the realm of possibility. Success to me would be a town that said, if we hadn't done that, we would have been so thumped by this, but look how well we fared. So I hope in the next couple of years, well, that we don't get thumped so bad that someone has to say that, okay, but if that we feel like the resilience measures we're taking make a difference.
Great, good morning, everyone. I'm Dan Burgess, Director of the Governor's Energy Office. It's really daunting to have to go after y'all. Tough to sit here, but so the Governor's Energy Office is the state designated energy office. We have, it is an honor to be in the position and to have a great team. I served on the Climate Council last year as the co-chair of the Energy Working Group. Ken Colburn, I believe, is online and not here today, but he's my co-chair and great to have him back. Bring the expertise of the Energy Office. Looking forward to this process, and I just say from a success perspective, we having clean, affordable, reliable energy in a way that grows our economy and impacts people positively, I think is where we're headed. But I also want to say that one of the hallmarks of the action plan last time is that it was an action plan, right? And that people could see themselves in it. I've been to countless meetings with municipalities or others where they hold up the plan and say, I've looked at it and we're doing this. And I think we've set the foundation of that with state policy and the plan, but really focusing on how we move more towards implementation and setting that pathway forward is what I see success as. Thank you.
Great. So we have 2 folks online, in addition to you, Hannah. So I'm just gonna ask folks, I think we have Melissa and Ken online. And so Melissa, if you're still there, I know you were trying to hang on to the last minute here to be able to join. Melissa, are you still here?
I'm here, but I am unable to start my video because
Okay.
the host has stopped it. Okay, great. Well, hi everyone. My name is Melissa Law. I'm an owner of Bumbleroot Organic Farm. We are a small organic vegetable and flower farm in southern Maine. And this is my second term on the Climate Council, also my second round participating in the Natural and Working Lands Working Group. And so in terms of my expertise and experience, I bring the farming perspective to the council. Farming has always been a huge part of Maine's identity, and we as farmers are really on the front lines of facing the impacts of climate change every single day. You know, I'm entering my 10th year, my 10th growing season here in Maine, and every season has been totally different. Every day really is totally dependent on the weather. So we're dealing with the impacts of climate change firsthand, and I think that that's a really important perspective for this council. I also bring the perspective of a small business owner operating at extremely low profit margins. And so I think that that's a valuable perspective to just bring the realities of the costs associated with climate change and the obstacles that small businesses are facing trying to adapt. So yeah, in terms of what's new this go around, since 2019, when the first Climate Council term started, I've had 2 children. So I'm bringing a new perspective of being a mom and thinking about the children that I have recently brought into this world and what climate change is going to mean for them. So thanks. It's really an honor to be a part of this process again.
Thanks, Melissa. We have 2 other folks, I think. Ken Colburn, co-chair of the Energy Working Group. You will say hi.
Great, thank you very much, David. I'm Ken Colburn. As David mentioned and Dan did, I'm both a returning member and pleased to be co-chair along with Dan of the Energy Working Group. I'm a retired energy geek, well, to the extent that one can ever retire from being a geek, and bring climate and energy expertise, mostly from a regulatory perspective, throughout my career. I'm here because essentially there's, as I told the Global Philanthropy Forum once, there's nothing you care about, whether it's air and water quality or the economy or child poverty or public health or equity or even taxes, that climate change won't make worse. So we are definitely all in this together. David asked for what new perspectives we as returning members bring. And one, echoing Dan's thoughts, is a perspective of accomplishment. So many climate action plans, and I had the opportunity to assist many states with them, simply haven't been acted on. And in Maine, we have actually reduced emissions. We have actually moved forward with policies to address climate change. So a perspective of accomplishment is not common in these endeavors. So it's really to Maine's credit and the Maine Climate Council's credit that that is the case in our situation. At the same time, I'm plagued by the urgency with which we must act, and particularly from an energy perspective in electrifying our economy. And I'm struck by in how many cases our existing structures and policies and practices actually interfere with progress on that front as our energy sector transforms, much in the way as our telephone sector transformed and our computing sector transformed. It'll become much more decentralized, and yet there are interests that don't want that to happen, or at least not happen readily, that we have to deal with. Fundamentally, I am enthused by the fact that we are acting in Maine, as Michael Stoddard alluded to, in terms of leadership, in what might be called the best it's ever been, the best in the country. And at the same time, I'm haunted by the fact that it's nowhere near good enough to meet the demands of the future as climate bears down upon us. So that's my perspective from the Energy Committee, and I'm grateful to be working with Dan and the members of the committee to promote progress on these fronts. Thanks very much, David.
Thanks, Ken. And Steve Dixon's also on the line, if you're in a position to say hi.
Sure. Thank you, David. Good morning, everybody. My name is Steve Dixon. I'm going to stay off camera, but I would like to say it's nice to be here and to be able to attend remotely when you're not really able to do it in person. I am the state geologist and director of the Maine Geological Survey, and we are in the Bureau of Resource Information and Land Use Planning in Judy East's shop, which is part of the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. And I'm a co-chair of the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee with Ivan and Susie, who are there with you in the room. On the last scientific assessment in 2020, I contributed to the chapter on sea level rise and storm surge. And I've been with the Maine Geological Survey going back to 1986. And during that time, by 1988, the state had adopted its first sea level rise standards for beaches, just beaches, not the whole coast. And it's been through a few iterations since then, and the latest iteration has come through the STS's last report. I think one of the things that's been a success has been with the standards that the Department of Environmental Protection has taken on for the beach systems and the natural ecosystems of the dune environment. There has been considerable amount of coastal development, but it's all been done in a very safe and sound way, and there have been no storms damaging those properties in any significant way. So I'm optimistic that using the good science and the good planning and the good policy development, we can move forward, not just in the beach environments, but along the whole coast of Maine in the subject of coastal hazards from flooding and from erosion as we move forward as a state. Maine has the 4th longest coast in the United States. We have a lot of vulnerable areas for sea level rise. We have a lot of rocky coast, which is nice, but it's a very complicated system to work in. So we are challenged, but I think we can make a great go of it by working it beyond just the beach and the dune systems, but to salt marshes and the rest of the coast. So I'm very optimistic that even though the sea level is at its highest it's ever been in over a century, we can get ready to deal with higher water levels and as time goes by. So with that, I'll just say thank you very much. I'll be listening in and glad to be part of the participation by mostly listening today. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Steve. I think that's everybody that we had that are members that are online. Thank you all very much. I know we went quite a bit over time, but it was really great to hear from all of you. And those were wonderful responses. I feel like I know all of you a little bit better than I did before. I realized that I skipped the assignment, as did Hannah. But very quickly, I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection. I've been working primarily in air quality issues for a couple of decades. I was a former director for the Bureau of Air Quality along with Jim Brooks, and on the board of directors for the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative now as commissioner. We have 400 environmental experts at the department who are all very committed to working on implementation of the plan and who are at our disposal as needed for information. We generate the biennial greenhouse gas report, which I'll be talking to you about in just a minute. And I would say for me, success is all the same things you've all talked about. It is also when we do that biennial report, watching the trend line in emissions go down. And so every 2 years, I'm really interested to see what that trajectory looks like. So I want to see a steady downward trajectory on that graph. And also to see an uptick in economic development. I really want to see us being able to put this to work in a way that's going to help our economy grow, and to have the outcome of our plan be something that's going to be resilient and sustainable under future political scenarios, so that this is something that everybody can see value in, and that this good work will continue for many years to come. So I think with that, we're going to give to you all a copy of our progress report. And I'm going to go through real quick because we have spent quite a bit of time on introductions. Just a quick recap of our goals, where we are, and then turn it over to Hannah to walk through some of our major accomplishments. So as you'll recall, we have 2 emission reduction goals. This is sort of one of the quantitative ways that we measure how well we are achieving our emission reductions. So we want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 45% by 2030 and 80% by 2050. Again, going back to that trend line I look at, getting to 80% by 2050, that's going to be a pretty steep downward slope we're going to need to see on that emissions trajectory. We also have in statute a requirement to achieve carbon neutrality by 2045. And ultimately, the work that we're all doing is to be able to put together the next update to the 4-year plan to be delivered by December 1st of next year. So when we've looked at our emissions to date, we see that the vast majority of greenhouse gas emissions is coming from fossil fuel combustion. And then the largest source of those combustion emissions is from the transportation sector, followed by the residential sector. Then 12% comes from commercial and industrial sectors, and finally 5% from our standalone electric generators. So this is why we talk so much about the need to reduce emissions, particularly from transportation and from our own homes. Good news is that we're already 75% of the way to our carbon neutrality goal, because we have tremendous natural resources in this state. We achieve a great deal of carbon sequestration, and hopefully as we continue to grow our forest economy, we will be able to sequester even more carbon through new products, through harvesting. And we are 25% of the way below 1990 levels for greenhouse gas emissions. So we have met some of our older targets, and our trajectory is looking pretty good for reaching at least our nearer term goal. But like I said, we've got a lot of work to do to reach that 80% reduction target. And with that, I'll turn it over to Hannah.
Great. Well, good to see you all. And I didn't have to introduce myself, but I will. My name is Hannah Pingree. I am the director of the Governor's Office of Policy, Innovation, and Future. I'm the co-chair of the Maine Climate Council, and it is great to see you all in real life and not at the Augusta Civic Center where we're all blending into a crowd. So thank you for coming here in person, and it's good to see the folks online as well. I guess I will just say, like many of you, we have been at this for 5 years. We're incredibly excited to have the new members of the Maine Climate Council bringing energy and new ideas and optimism and new perspectives. And I'm incredibly grateful for those of you who are returning. 5 years of focused work on climate has made a measurable difference. And that's why we're here today to this is our last progress report on our current climate plan before you all help us generate a new climate plan, which we will be reporting on progress 2 years from now. So this is a big day, but in some ways, it's a bit of an odd day because we're reporting on where we've been and we're starting to look forward to the future. So I will just quickly say my vision of success, I think many of you have shared so many perspectives that I think are worth just highlighting. My vision of success is that we all feel hopeful, including we all, meaning the 1.3 million people in the state of Maine, about where we're going on climate and the benefits that certain climate actions can mean for families and their budgets and their homes and their lives. I really love the perspective that many have raised in terms of the economic opportunity for Maine people as our economy changes, but honestly, as our heritage industries really see tremendous new opportunity through, as Heather likes to say, I'll keep repeating it, global climate solutions, which we think Maine can be a global leader in. So that's incredibly important. And as you'll hear a little bit in the progress report that we're talking about today, we're starting for the first time to do the benchmarks for our equity metrics. And I think that this climate plan, we talk a lot about how we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We've put a lot of work into this first report. We have some very specific targets, but how do we go deeper in ensuring that the benefits really reach those most rural communities who have the least resources to plan for climate, low and moderate income people who are really busy in their day-to-day lives with their kids and their families and work. And a lot of this could benefit their families, but they're going to need help figuring out how to access the resources the state has. And obviously, as we talked about, the job opportunities that are going to be available in this changing climate and economy. I think for Maine, there are clearly challenges, but there are tremendous opportunities, and our job is to keep steering towards those and bringing that hopeful vision of what's possible, but honestly doing all the work of training people for the professions that we have now and that we will have in the coming decades. I'm going to remind you of a few of the things that we put in the last climate plan. Again, you've seen these slides many, many times, so I'll be quick on them. And we really want to bring it back to the conversation for this group. But you recall the 4 major goals of our last climate plan: to reduce Maine's greenhouse gas emissions that is required in law, to make Maine more resilient to the impacts of climate change, and the Resilience Working Group is going to come up with the measures by which we further can show our progress, foster economic opportunity and prosperity through our climate plan, and advance equity through Maine's climate response. Again, you're familiar with the 8 strategies. The first 3 really about reducing emissions in our transportation sector, our buildings, and our energy systems. The next one about the job opportunities in clean energy, but also the challenges that are being faced by those jobs that are being changed by climate. How the very, very heavy lifting of the Natural Working Lands Group and other agencies who are represented in this room about how we protect Maine's environment and meet our carbon neutrality goals. How we build healthy and resilient communities and invest in climate ready infrastructure for our 480 plus municipalities in the state of Maine and the 1.3 million people who live in them, who need support but see a lot of opportunity in the kind of investments we're making. And then last but not least, our last strategy is really about how we engage Maine people. Amara talked about climate education, something we've seen some success in the last 2 years thanks to her leadership. But how do we make sure that everybody in Maine, from young people who are trying to grapple with both the challenges and the opportunities and even the science of what is happening, to all the communities and people in Maine who could take advantage of a heat pump rebate, who are trying to sort out, can I drive an electric vehicle in my town in Maine? All the things that we need to do to educate people on the opportunities they have, but also the really complex systems that they need to sometimes navigate to make those things happen. So this is the dashboard. This is sort of like, this is the royal unveiling. You all have gotten the progress report, and I do want to recognize tremendous hard work of the Governor's Office of Policy Innovation team to get this progress report to you today. It will be posted online soon if it hasn't been already. We have a tremendous dashboard where you can really delve into every single one of our progress points. But I want to just, while I give huge credit to our team and to Melanie's team and others, many state agencies, many communities have really done the heavy lifting and work that goes into coming up with these metrics, but honestly, all the work that went into making these things happen. Michael can give you the painful details and the exciting opportunities that hundreds and thousands of heat pump installers have had to travel the state of Maine to meet the goals that I'm going to talk about in just a minute. For the land conservation organizations, the state agencies, the Land for Maine's Future Board, and all the folks who put in the heavy lifting to try to move that needle to our 30% land conserved goal. So Just quickly, I'm gonna go through these in a little bit more detail, but obviously we're seeing continued progress in electric vehicles, especially on the charging side, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. I'd say probably the heaviest lift, and I'm looking at Joyce and I'm looking at Jeff and the members of the Transportation Working Group, is how we start to really accelerate the trajectory to electric vehicle adoption in Maine. And a lot of it is not about us. It is honestly about national automakers, about supply chains, but clearly we're all reading the news and seeing that by the mid-2020s and later, many, or if not most vehicles are going to be electrified or hybrid. So a lot of heavy lifting happening outside of the state to help us reach our incredibly aggressive 2030 and 2050 goals. So super exciting points, and I'll get into the details on heat pumps. We've talked about it a lot, but clearly this is like the place where Maine is absolutely leading the country. I think since the governor made her big announcement about a more aggressive heat pump goal, folks continue to call Michael, to call Dan, to call the governor to say, how is Maine doing this? So again, one of the coldest states in the country, a very rural state, and we are leading the country in heat pump deployment. We're making good progress on clean energy use through Maine's renewable portfolio standard. We are at 51% renewable energy being used on our grid. I'll let Dan talk a little bit about it later, but some exciting progress and continued growth in clean energy jobs. We've got a lot of work to do to get to 30,000 jobs by 2030, but we are seeing progress. 22% of Maine land conserved, and a couple folks have already talked about it, but we are moving the needle. And as Judy and Amanda and Tom and others are going to help us heavy lift, the next 8% is going to take a lot of folks around the state of Maine helping to make it happen. Kate. Community Resilience Partnership, we are super proud in our office. We are working with 175 municipalities who are now participating in the Community Resilience Partnership. We set a goal to have at least 100 communities by 2023. We need to set a new goal that's much bigger. As many people know, we have nearly 500 municipalities in the state of Maine. So 175 communities, including Maine's tribes, are participating in the partnership. We're really proud of that. Melanie already talked about sort of the ultimate measure, which is where are we in terms of greenhouse gas emissions? So 25% below 1990 levels. And that is based on a report that's still a couple years behind. So next year, we will have the next measure of progress. And Melanie already talked about the 75%. So this is the first time we've shared the equity metrics. We still have more data collection. The equity working group did a great job saying these are the measures we need to be collecting. Some of those measures are still going to take more work with state agencies and other partners to make them happen. But for the first time, we are sharing progress on some goals, but some metrics that we've set out. And it is actually the work of this climate council in many of these areas to set goals in the next climate plan. So 7,800 low-income heat pumps installed since 2019. We have a goal to install at least 15,000. This is the work of both Efficiency Maine and Maine Housing, an area where we've seen a lot more focus in the last couple of years and where we want to make greater progress, but it's good news. We have 41 high social vulnerability index communities in the Community Resilience Partnership. And if you want to know what that means, ask Brian or Ashley or Sarah. But we're really trying to focus on those towns who have high percentages of low-income populations, but are really facing the very worst climate impacts. Many of them lack planning staff. So how do we really engage those communities who need our help in terms of planning for climate impacts and taking the kind of actions that could save taxpayers money? We have a statistic of 13% energy burden among low-income households compared to 3% overall, something that we see opportunity in as we focus on weatherization and heat pumps. How do we really help families save money and adopt the technologies that we've all been talking about? 2,900 new low-income homes weatherized since 2019. 75% of the infrastructure adaptation funds have been invested in these medium or high social vulnerability index towns, and I'll show you a chart on that in a few minutes. Rebates to low and moderate income households. So Molly on our team helped launch this just not that long ago with Efficiency Maine Trust, and Efficiency Maine Trust has a new enhanced rebate. So this is a new program. So 9% is good. The number used to be very like almost zero. So we need clearly to accelerate this, but trying to make EVs, which are increasingly affordable, there are now used EVs on the market, available to all Mainers is essential to our work equity. And last but not least, 8% of low-income homes with no internet service compared to 2% overall. And I'll look to Heather where we have obviously tremendous federal investment in this area, and we hope to make a lot of progress with the incredible work of the Connectivity Authority. So I won't go into a lot of detail, but you all know the statistics. We showed it at the last Climate Council meeting. We are leading the nation in heat pump deployment. We met our goal 2 years early, around 100,000 heat pumps deployed. We set a new goal of 175,000 more by 2027. So get to work, Maine Housing and Michael Brennan and Michael Stoddard. Really, I think again, this is a huge part of our climate progress. Thanks again to those two organizations, lots of folks around this room, including state agencies who are installing heat pumps, and the Maine Community College system, who's really trained hundreds of people to go out and help do this work. So we already talked a little bit about these, but clearly the goals, the big yellow line goals, we are setting goals that require us to accelerate our progress. And I think that is kind of the theme of our work. We are doing a really good job in this area, and we're trying to even go bigger. So that's bold, but it's honestly how we're gonna hit our big goals in the future. So due to the hard work of, I'm looking at Joyce and Michael sitting next to each other and lots of other folks around this room, we have launched the new Recharge Maine network, and we have continued to increase the number of public EV charging stations, especially those fast charging stations that are currently being deployed. There are over 1,000 ports in 459 locations, including many municipalities and communities across the state. So the map is exciting. Even more exciting are the deployment of the new federal NEVI funds that will put fast charging in lots of new parts of our state over the coming year. And I think we are in that area actually leading the country in making it happen. These federal funds are not easy to access, they're not easy to implement, but we are doing a really good job of that. Electric vehicles on the road, again, an area where we're seeing more, but we are clearly, we need to see, this is an area where the hockey stick needs to become much more significant in the coming years. And again, we're really relying on national automakers that have made commitments to these vehicles to start to deliver, especially by 2025, when the trajectory needs to be much greater for our state. Again, the EV rebates to low and moderate income households, we've gone from 0 to 9% in a year. Clearly, this is an area where we'd like to see it be much more significant in the coming years. Clean energy jobs, talked about this, but we saw a downturn during the pandemic. Folks like Representative Kessler, those jobs dropped a little bit when people didn't necessarily want people in their homes doing weatherization during COVID. But to see this kind of continued growth, these are the people who are weatherizing homes, who are fixing electric vehicles, who are building the solar arrays, the wind projects, creating tons of good paying jobs in the state of Maine. Dan will talk a little bit more about it, but the Clean Energy Partnership being run by the Energy Office is helping to train people, everything from AGC to Revision Energy to the weatherization folks at Downey's Community Partners are getting grants to help get more people into these fields, especially non-traditional employees. I talked about this, the 174 participating communities in the partnership, 129 have fully been enrolled. We've given over 100 grants. We're really excited to see the distribution across the state is significant, but obviously down East Maine, rural Maine, coastal Maine, there's lots of areas where we need to ensure that every community is thinking about climate. They should be taking advantage of a state program that will give them $50,000 to do whatever their community prioritizes. So lots of folks, again, in this room helping to make this program a reality, but especially folks at the municipal level who are really digging in, talking to citizens, and taking action. A program runs through the Maine Department of Transportation, the Infrastructure Adaptation Fund, a program recommended by the last climate plan. We put $20 million of Maine jobs and recovery funding into this. We made the first round of grants in the most recent budget cycle. Another $7 million was allocated to this program for culverts as well as future project developments. We haven't talked a lot about it today, and I'll hit a couple slides on it in a minute, but clearly we are seeing tremendous federal investment coming to the state of Maine for infrastructure rebuilding. And part of our goal is to make sure that those communities least able to access it are not missing this opportunity. So just a quick reminder of the many federal acronyms, but that really actually lay the groundwork for a lot of the work of the Maine Climate Council. So the American Rescue Plan Act sent the state $1 billion for the Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan, lots of climate investments through that fund. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law passed just a couple of years ago, significant, and I won't steal Bruce's thunder, significant transportation investment, a lot of it with a resiliency angle, as well as money for energy grids, for resiliency, tremendous broadband investment. So lots of opportunity in this law that lasts for about 5 to 10 years, depending on which program. The Congress also passed the Inflation Reduction Act, the most significant climate bill ever passed by the US Congress, with significant incentives, especially for individuals, but also for communities, state government, nonprofits, to take action investing in clean energy. And last but not least, the CHIPS and Science Act, which is a lot about technology, but the kind of technology that Pat was talking about. We see huge opportunities in Maine's innovation sector for investment through this act. So I'm not going to read all the words on this slide, but I will just say, due to the hard work of the Department of Marine Resources, Department of Agriculture, Conservation and Forestry, Heather Johnson and DECD, we are seeing tremendous investment in seafood, in forestry, and in our agriculture programs through these federal funds, through state funds, have allowed us to invest in these kinds of businesses and the kind of actions that we hope they will take as they grow their businesses to become more climate resilient. So I know Pat will be happy for me to talk about this. We're really proud of it. The state of Maine was recently designated as a federal tech hub, one of just 31 states around the country. Again, the Department of Economic and Community Development, Maine Technology Institute, lots of folks in this room have been involved in Maine's Forest Bioproducts Advanced Manufacturing Tech Hub. And what does this mean? It means the federal government recognizes that Maine can be a global leader in this area, which is everything from wood fiber bioproducts that can build buildings, to packaging materials, to nano products that can create something that Pat will better explain to you. So we are really proud of this. This allows Maine to compete for much bigger funds, but this is really where we see the opportunity. I will say this also could include things like kelp and ocean products to also create these bioproducts. So this tech hub is really a sign that the folks down in Washington and folks around the country see Maine as a leader, and we need to see ourselves as a leader and continue to invest and focus in an area that could create huge economic growth. So I'll just say, last but not least, before I transition, we're thinking about the next climate plan. We are today COP28, the Council of Parties. None of us, I would say, had to go to Dubai to be part of the international leaders now talking about climate change. I'm sure some of you heard on the radio driving up them talking about the kinds of conversations that global leaders are having on these issues. They're talking about the fact that this is going to be the hottest year on record. There is a lot of really challenging news on climate that is going to be brought up that we've all talked about here. increasing health impacts, increasing drought and storm events. Those who are least able to manage climate impacts are being challenged. But I will just say, they're also talking about the hopeful signs. The US just put out its national climate assessment, which it does every 5 years. And the good news is, actually, unlike some countries around the world, the US is reducing our emissions. We are down 12% since 2005. The US wants to hit 50% reduction by 2030. The US should be very happy for states like Maine, who are above, and we are leading, and we are contributing to the kinds of success that the US needs to see to really meet our global commitments. I will just say lastly, I am incredibly grateful to the folks in this room. I think this climate report and all the work we have put in really sets the stage for our work going forward. But I think in many of these statistics that we put out there, we see where we need to really dig in and do more work. So I think there's no one area that doesn't need focus. I think we are talking about this plan as something that we are trying to sharpen, we are trying to broaden and deepen and ensure that as many people as possible in Maine see themselves in this plan and see the opportunities for continued progress. So with that, I will pass it off to David. You all have this report. You can read every detail tonight on your Friday night. But I will just say, I think that this climate council has really, I think Tony Rozio and our team have talked about radical transparency. Every one of you are a part of that. We set out these goals, and every single year we're going to talk about how we're doing it. So thank you for being a part of it. We're going to continue to sharpen where we go with these numbers. And with that, David's going to bring it back to all the rest of us.
Online missed the fact that when this report was handed out moments ago, it was literally hot, like hot on the bread. So that was kind of fun. All right. Yeah, so we need a break. We've been sitting around for almost 2 hours. I think we're gonna need a break, but before we go on break, I'll tell you what's gonna happen afterwards, which is to reflect on what you just heard in this progress report and what's in this document. We want you to just have some conversations in smaller groups for just 10, 15 minutes, something short. And then we've got some cool little panels of you all set up to talk about some issues. We are running behind, but not viciously behind. So what I'd love to do is take a 10-minute break, but before we go on break, let me just signal the groups. So you have some shared accountability among the 4 of you to come back from break and start your conversations. So what I think will happen is people just sort of pull back from the table in groups of 4-ish, 3, 4, 5-ish. So like the 4 of you pull back from the table and you'll have a conversation up to Pat probably. And then the 4 of you will pull back from this table and have a conversation from Kate up to Bruce, right? And then some combination of the 6 of you maybe, or Heather, you swing around and join Gary and others. We'll have a conversation when you come back from break. And figure that out as you go, just groups of 3 or 4, and pull back from the table a little bit, all right? The question, I hope you do, I'm gonna put on this little tweet here to remind you when you get back from break, and the folks online are gonna have their very own conversation, which they get the 70 participants to listen into. But it's basically saying, based on what you just heard, right, from Melanie, from Hannah, and what you're seeing in this report, what are 1 or 2 topics that you would absolutely want to see recommendations on from the working groups, right? So you think about the progress made, you think about where we've gotten to and the challenges ahead. What are 1 or 2 things you really want the working groups to come out in June and provide you some thoughts on? Okay, I say 1 or 2 because we could all come up with 16, right? Or 30. But I'm trying to focus the mind to say, wow, this is really important. And so as a group of 4 people, talk about it, think about, see if there's some overlaps, if not. I've got a little worksheet that one of the groups in the 4 can write down some of those ideas that are coming up so we don't lose them, right? So let's take a 10-minute break. It's right at the top of the hour, so 10 minutes past, let's start up again, come back. We'll get right into these groups. I'll leave one of these workshops, worksheets on the table so you have something to remind you what I just said right now. Folks online, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and then when we come back, you all whoever's left, Ken and Steve, maybe it's just the two of you. I'm not sure who's online if Melissa had to drop. You can have a conversation about that too. And you'll have 68 people listening into your conversation. So let's come back in 10 minutes. In the meantime, well, if you could just cut off the sound from here for now.
Hi, Molly. Can you hear me? Ken and Steve, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you okay.
Great.
Same here, Ari. Yep.
Great. Just one moment. I'm just going to check that the room can't hear us. All right, so we're good to go ahead. So Ken and Steve, it's a pleasure to. That's great. I think all of the attendees will be able to hear us. And Ken and Steve, since you're both counselors, you'll both be we'll be audible to all online attendees, but the room can't hear us right now. Just to introduce myself, and I go ahead and put myself on video so everyone can see me. My name's Aarti Halbe. I work with David at the Consensus Building Institute, and I'll just steer our small group today. So just to reiterate the question for the small groups, just based on what we've heard this morning and your own experience within the Maine Climate Council, what are one or two topics on which you would absolutely want to see recommendations from the working groups?
Thanks, Rati, and I'm impressed at the ability to separate us from the whole group. I don't know if you did that by small groups or what, but it's a level of Zoom expertise I aspire to.
So just to clarify, we aren't separate. We are only separate from the larger group who are meeting in person right now, but all of the online attendees, around 60 odd people, are listening into us.
Sure.
Sure. But go ahead. Yeah.
One thing that's a little bit unfortunately geeky, but bears immense impact on our society is the power sector's transforming. And allow me just a moment of background on that. You know, the iPhone is I think it's 12 years old now, and yet it has entirely changed our lives. And likewise laptops. It used to be data processing centers and you may be connected with a terminal. And now everybody takes their computers as their God-given rights. And these things, at least taken together, if not individually, have essentially enabled working from home and our response to COVID and our flexibility as a society. Well, a similar thing is happening in the power sector as it decentralizes and moves from a massive, centralized, capital-intensive, one-way street from power plants to your outlet into distributed energy resources that will then be aggregated, and rooftop solar that'll be part of supply. And how we all organize that, it'll be crazy, but it won't be any harder than organizing iPhones and laptops. So how we manage the transformation of the power sector from its former centralized character to a decentralized demand managed entity is something that I hope will be in here somehow. Sorry for the long explanation.
No, I think that's really helpful. Steve, do you have anything to add there?
Sure I do. And being a scientist and a geologist, I tend to gravitate to those things, but I'm not going to, because the International Energy Agency has come out with information that was summarized in the journal Nature, November 21st of this year, by Jeff Tollefson, Tollefson. And I'm going to refer to that simply because I'm a chart person, a graph person, and there are graphs in there that show how to bend the curve. And that by that, you know, that expression bending the curve refers to reducing CO2 emissions, the rise in fossil fuel emissions and CO2 concentration in the atmosphere. So to bend the curve and get it to turn around and come down, which is what we all need to be working on, both in the state level and in the world, we can do that best through two things. One is wind power and the other is solar power. The part we have been focusing on a fair amount here in Maine also is the electrification of the transportation grid and automobiles and trucks and so on. But the comparison in the charts shows that the transportation sector has very little influence in the next 5 years or so to bend the curve, whereas more solar and more wind can bend the curve in a matter of just a few years. And this is, of course, a global perspective, but our contributions to that are coming out now. So I think emphasis and focus needs to be on energy sources and how those sources, as Ken was talking about, make its way to and from people's homes and or businesses and so on in the state. So I think that to me was really enlightening. We can do a lot in the car, automobile, truck sector, and we should, but we won't bend the curve in the next few years, and we need to keep the world from going above 2 degrees C.
And Steve, correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't seen that in Jeff's article, but that's probably because turnover in the transportation sector is fairly slow. I might buy a new car this year, but my 10 neighbors may not. So we'll wait for the next 10 years until each of them, one per year. It's that kind of slow pace.
Right.
Imagine that's the primary cause of that. Fleet turnover is not immediate. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it was Bruce Van Note at a prior meeting, he suggested, the same sort of thing. It takes a while, but even if you get those vehicles that are emitting a high amount of CO2 and replace them with ones that even cut it in half, there's a step forward. But yeah, the cycle of, durable goods, if you will, is in this picture. But yes, even if by the year 2030 in these graphs, the electric vehicle build out is still about a fifth of wind or a fifth of solar, maybe a sixth of solar. So it is important, and all of the above needs to happen at the same time, right? We can't just, there's no one thing that's going to bend the curve.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, and we also had a comment from someone who's attending saying that making the grid cleaner actually helps to make transportation cleaner as we kind of start to move toward electrification.
Absolutely true. Yeah.
And that's a wonderful point that people often overlook, because EVs aren't just cleaner, they are progressively cleaner as the grid cleans up. And by the way, the grid is one thing that has been getting more clean. Now, a lot of that is the shutdowns of coal in favor of natural gas, which is a factor of about 2, maybe a little more than 2. So nowhere near enough, but at least it is cleaning as opposed to many sectors which are not.
I want to ask, just kind of based on both of your own experiences within the Maine Climate Council, are there any other topics that you would want to see? I think we've talked a bit about energy and transportation, but is there any other area that you would see needing focus over the next few months?
Well, I'll say one thing that seems to be rather important, and there are a lot of communities in Maine that don't have the ability or the depth of staff to manage to do much other than listen and learn. So I think, and it's been mentioned over and over again with the Community Resiliency Partnership Program, but giving the people in the state that don't have the means to make a difference an opportunity, whether that's, getting help writing more grants or getting things done in their town that they could not afford to do. So it's sort of an equity issue in many different ways, some socioeconomic issues and so on. But I think that's important because we don't want to leave some of Maine behind. And as things roll out and improve, whether it's even the internet build out, it's important that everybody has an opportunity to make a difference.
And that would be something I imagine that the Community Resilience Working Group would work on? Is that how you would, is that?
Yes, and as we're trying to do here is include equity in every decision, in every aspect. So equity considerations are important. For one example, is we at the Maine Geological Survey are trying to understand saltwater intrusion from rising sea levels. And we will be looking at places where we need to monitor, but that will not leave out communities that can't afford to do something on their own. So we want to be able to provide across the board the background, the information, no matter what the communities themselves are capable of undertaking.
Sure. Thank you.
Would note, Arati, that current state policies, and indeed not just Maine, but elsewhere, are not ideal. Either they're poor or they're unsustainable if they're good, like Maine, for rooftop solar or even ground-based solar are an issue that needs to be reformed and re-rationalized. We're giving away too much to the big solar guys that, they provide solar and that's helpful, but the benefit of that could stay.
All right, so we're coming back on to the webinar now. And we don't know what happened online in that interim, but hopefully interesting conversation happened. So we're gonna do just a super quick shout out. We are not gonna do a comprehensive shout out of what you all just talked about. And then we've got a couple quick panel conversations and then we're gonna finish up for the day. So you all were just talking. I'd love to do I don't wanna hear your list. I wanna hear one thing that's near the top of your list. Right? So. You got 10 things you want me to do it? Here. Now. What's that?
You can speak to that.
Which one was it?
Key Victor is thermal energy.
Oh, ooh, wow, okay.
Oh, so it's trying to think, we have a built-in assumption that we need to triple or quadruple our clean energy generation to meet our decarbonization goals. And that may be right, but I think there's a lot we get missed when we think about how we could actually bring that energy curve down through things like utility scale solutions and thermal energy networks that can help heat and cool buildings in places where that makes sense, where heat pumps are great and do a lot of the load in some places, but we should think more broadly about what can be brought to bear to bring that cost down, because the footprint of the energy generation is just enormous.
All right, so Dan and Ken, I did that with Hannah too. What did I say?
I called him Dan's daughter, so it's fine.
All right, so let's think about that, right? How are we not having to triple, right, our electricity needs? Okay, great. One other thing, just shout it out. Something you'd like to hear a recommendation about. Yeah.
So we're going to double or triple our electrical demand. How is the infrastructure going to supply that, both in power itself and actually getting electrons from A to B?
All right.
The second one was workforce.
Okay, great. So we got two that are squarely in the energy space and trying to think that, although I will say that managing demand and those things hit buildings and hits transportation. So there's going to be a common effort there. Okay, and workforce, you want to see some workforce recommendations. Something else that you folks want to see. Don't be shy.
We talked about, our group over here talked about hitting the state's 30 by 30 goals, but making sure it's geographically distributed and that people can access, especially the reserved lands. But then we started to get into the need for growth and housing, especially in the southern part of our state, and sort of how these two goals intersect. And they don't have to be mutually exclusive, but they will require focused policy recommendations.
Love it. All right, so let's get some good thinking on that.
+1, you might look at our little group here.
Yeah.
Incentive-based, and Bruce's word, carrots, for for local unified housing, health, conservation, transportation
Whoa,
mesh.
nice.
You gotta tell the stories of how it's all connected.
Right, and these
do it.
things fit into different pieces of the goals, right? So working groups, we'd love to see some thoughtful work around that intersection, right? Of how we grow, how we have housing, how we also meet conservation goals, okay, in equitable distributed ways. What else is on your list? High up, yeah, Jeff.
Programs to facilitate the adoption of strategies by low income and other systemically disinvested groups.
Right, right. How do you do that in practice? Working groups.
How do we get more people to install heat pumps?
Right. Right. Wouldn't necessarily be the first in line normally. Okay. Right. Anybody else had something like that as well on their list? Yeah.
Similar, auditing our goals for unintended consequences that further inequities.
Right, right. Let's think about that. Okay, I'm curious just for Steve and Ken who are online, if there's anything you want to say. We may not actually be able to hear the people online right now because we turned you off earlier. So give us 1 second. Try talking, maybe we'll hear you. Ken or Steve?
Yeah, this is Steve.
Excellent, we do hear you. Go ahead. What happened online while we were talking here in the room? Just
Well,
two
I don't know,
things.
I don't know if I can summarize it, but I'll at least chime in that one of the things that we talked about was the energy, both, getting built out, homes and other places in the grid is key. And the second point that I was making was that based on what I've seen from the International Energy Agency, the best way to bend the curve to get CO2 to turn around and come down, it will be based mostly in solar and wind energy, less so from the vehicle sector and vehicle fleet. So emphasis and focus should be on more solar and more wind power coming into the system.
Okay, all right. Those feel like some common themes from what we're hearing in the room as well. All right, let's just take one or two, and then we've got some very quick hit, interesting panels that Hannah and Melanie are gonna lead. Anything else we want to shout out right now that was really important? Yeah, Joyce.
I think sustainable funding to do the work.
Yeah. Funding, right. Make sure that we have some thoughts around that. Okay. And we use the word sustainable to differentiate between this bubble of funding we have right now. Okay. One more thing from maybe a group that felt you didn't, anything else you want to say? Yeah.
Protecting working waterfront and sea level rise, funding needed to help the towns and communities, protect their roads and bridges.
So let's see some recommendations around that. And that's one of those areas that's going to cross over between the Resilience Committee and the Coastal Marine Committee. So we hope to see some cross-pollination happening there. Sam, you had your hand up?
Yeah, and helping communities to understand managed retreat.
Aha. A very sensitive topic. Just throwing that out there. Just throwing it out there.
Here, just repeat it for Judy.
Oh, here, helping communities to understand managed retreat. Very interesting topic. Okay, great. So there is more on your sheets. If you would like to give them to me, I can make sure that we share it all around amongst ourselves and with working group co-chairs. So feel free to hand those sheets to me before the end of our meeting this morning. I'm going to turn it over to Hannah, who has panel number 1. And all I'll say before Hannah gets going and then Melanie does another one is we've got about a half hour, right? I know some of you on this panel, and many of you have a lot to say. And I'll just say, brevity is gonna be everybody's friend this morning. He's looking right at me. Hannah, let me turn it over to you to talk about this first panel.
Okay, great. Well, I actually just first want to recognize Representative Amanda Collmore and Representative Dan Enkles, who are both in the room. They're not on the Climate Council. They may be on the working groups, but actually it's awesome to have you here today. Backing up Representative Kessler. If the other legislative members of the Climate Council don't show up, I'm going to draft you both. So really appreciate you being here. It means a lot. So this is what we're calling the implementers panel. And it's actually, we often hear from Dan and from Michael and Joyce and others. But I've pulled in some other commissioners who are deeply involved, as well as Kate, who's been partnering on some of these things, to talk about sort of some of the bright spots that we didn't delve into as deeply in our overall presentation of where we are. Again, this incredible influx of federal money is meaning a lot of new opportunities for the state, and the state agencies and their partners are helping to implement them. So this is a kind of the implementers panel. So how I'm going to ask each of them to reflect on how we're doing so far, sort of the bright spots of things happening in your agency that are helping to implement this plan. And then the second question, if we get to it, is sort of the barriers and frustrations that are preventing us from making greater progress. So I've got Pat Kelleher, Commissioner of Department of Marine Resources, Kate Dempsey from the Nature Conservancy, Dan Brennan from Maine Housing, Dr. Terry Baugh from Maine CDC, and then last but not least, Commissioner Bruce Van Note from Maine DOT. So I'm going to start with you, Pat, on reflecting first on the bright spots of implementation from where you sit.
How much time do I have?
You have like 30 seconds. No.
Okay.
Stopwatch, I'll have you get.
Yeah, I'm not reserving any.
It's per answer, and and have David dance in the middle.
Yeah, I'm starting to get excited.
I'm just gonna go right and hit the highlights. So overall, we've submitted almost $150 million in bipartisan infrastructure law requests. That's 80 projects to restore 1,000 miles of sea and fisheries habitat, which could produce an additional 40 million fish annually. So projects where this is just to be clear, this is not just us alone. It's our partners, the tribe, DOT, even DOT can fish now. So that's great. So the 35 million that came in for DOT, DMR, and the Passamaquoddy tribe for updating culverts. NOAA, US Fish, and NIPWIP awarded 22 million to build a new fishway on the St. Croix River Dam that increases passage to over 680 miles of combined habitat and 68,000 acres of pond habitat. NIPWIP and US Fish and Wildlife Service awarded DMR 5.3 million to remove dams and build new fishways on the Sabatis. And then some other projects where DMR was an applicant with significant partner support and GoPIP support. Includes an additional 68 million in BIL and IRA funding that we're after as well. And I won't go into the details, but we're feeling pretty good with the conversations with the agencies that these fall well within their high priority range. In an early 2024, DMR and DOT will plan to submit another $30 million grant for culvert restoration for the federal highway funds, and DMR is submitting a $6 million request for culvert upgrades to NOAA CZM. So a lot going on in that fifth realm where we're having a lot of success. And I'll let Kate talk about how much money we raised compared to what I've got. So as I said earlier in introductions, climate change is impacting all of our fisheries, from alewives to urchins, but a major focus for us still revolves around the North Atlantic right whale. Last December, the department, with strong support from our delegation members, were able to leverage a major change in the omnibus bill to give us time to put protections in place for North Atlantic right whales, while actually bringing money to the table to do this work. So $50 million was brought to the table to do this work. 26 million is now part of NOAA's base budget. So 26 million goes to ASMFC, which Maine DMR gets 17 million a year.
Atlantic States Marine Fisheries.
Yeah, that one. I was told to be quick, Dave. I can't address it. So that's really huge. And you're like, why is this connected to climate change? Well, climate change is the driver for the North Atlantic right whales prey, which is calanus or copepods or cocoa puffs, as some people like to refer to them. The work that we're going to do is deploy passive acoustics monitoring so we can understand the movement of North Atlantic right whales throughout the Gulf of Maine, and our partner states to the south are expanding their passive acoustics monitoring. So we're gonna have the largest passive acoustic monitoring system on the East Coast, actually on either coast where it pertains to marine mammal protections. Aerial surveys to understand better what's going on, but boat-based habitat monitoring and sampling, and then that sampling work that we're doing for Calanus, we're partnering with somebody, we're partnering with somebody. Partnering with Bigelow to do some modeling around Calanus and Calanus distributions to better predict where whales will be at any time of year. And then a lot of innovative gear research. TNC was a contributor early on into that process, but we've received an additional $5 million for that work. Very controversial work with the industry, but the drivers for change with right whales is not something that we see changing overnight. And the federal government is certainly not going to let up with what they have for needs for protection. Bob Hayes talked about it, and it's kind of a high priority, but working waterfront remains an incredibly high priority for the state of Maine. Land Marine Future Program was well funded to deal with a lot of different projects. There is a bill now in Congress, both on the House side, sponsored by some Pingree person out of and Senator Collins now on the Senate side, to do more work for protection of working waterfront and infrastructure associated with it. So that is really great news. And then offshore wind, obviously DMR comes at offshore wind, not from a promotion or rejecting, but as understanding what the impacts are to our marine environment. And so trying to balance those protections on the marine environment side while things move forward on offshore wind. And GEO and DMR receive state funding in coordinating on doing some standing up our coastal mapping initiative and doing more mapping associated with offshore wind. We have to understand the baseline to understand really what the impact could be. So that's enough.
Awesome, thank that. Kate,
I mean,
you can just back clean
yield
up.
to the gentleman from Alma.
Yeah.
Oh, how about that? Let me just then, because Pat really did, we should have coordinated.
Can you just put it in perspective?
Yeah.
I mean, Pat did a great job, but just sort of like how significant this is.
So-
Everybody to hear that Hannah just said I did a great job.
The bulk of my career had been spent in securing federal dollars for work here in Maine. And like someone said, I used to have black hair before this started. And the commissioner and I and many other people, the Penobscot Nation, spent 9 years raising $32 million in public funds for the restoration of the Penobscot River. That was matched fully by private philanthropy. It took us 9 years to raise $32 million. So what Pat ticked off just on river restoration alone is more than we accomplished in 9 years. And we did it in about 9 months. So I just the pace and scale is remarkable. And I have a couple examples, but I think the takeaway for this group, and this is super geeky, whoever said they're a policy geek, like planning makes us able to leap at these opportunities. And I think that's why Maine has been incredibly successful. As I said, I've been in this business a long time. I have never seen the level of collaboration between different types of partners, different sectors, tribes, NGOs, local governments, private landowners, fishermen, etc. It doesn't mean we're all, always happy with each other, but we're figuring it out and the money does help. So sustainable funding. Couple things that maybe one of the commissioners won't mention is Maine got a ton of 13 electric school buses. That's actually a lot. We demonstrated together that in MDI and we analyzed what we need to make it work. Electric school buses are going to change the state. Who would have thought? And 2 other data points. Maine has, building on what Pat said, more complete data set on climate risky road crossings than any other state, practitioners around the state have a better understanding of these systems, and it's allowing us collectively to prioritize where we make infrastructure investments. And last one. Look at this, we're like the same person. This is like super geeky, but we've been doing it for 20 years practically. LiDAR mapping. The entire state is now covered and the coast has been updated with higher resolution. And again, that is allowing us to make really strategic decisions on where to invest in resiliency infrastructure. I could talk about this stuff all day, but I'm not going to.
Good job, Kate. Dan.
Okay, I had shared with you that Maine Housing is a bank and also an administrator of federal funding. So I'll talk about it in those two pots. Both of them share the same massive influx of funding to what we do and how we do it. On the bank side, thanks to Governor Mills and the legislature, hundreds of millions of dollars have come to Maine Housing over the last several years to advance our mission and produce more affordable housing, particularly on the multifamily side. For years and years, using the tools that we had, we were getting out about 250 units a year. This year and for the next 4 years, we're up to 700 units a year. And that was because MJRP, the various bond issues that the governor signed, a new state low-income housing tax credit law, $70 million from the legislature. So just exponential amount of funding came into our agency, and we already have a network of contractors and developers and architects and engineers and property managers that know how to get this done. So the pipeline right now we have in our portfolio is largest that it has ever been. And it's just a great, I've been there 30 years. It's great to be in this place. Now, Maine Housing, I would say, has led the way in energy efficient multifamily housing dating back to 2005, 2010, when Hannah was in the legislature and Speaker of the House. Our standards, when you come to Maine Housing, the standards that you have to build to have always exceeded the state level standards. And now we're just continuing to ratchet that up and ratchet that up and ratchet that up. And we are about to roll out the latest version of enhancing those standards that we've done collaboratively with the industry and with developers. So there's no controversy here. It's everybody's on the same page. Early on, we used to have to convince developers this is the right thing to do. Now it's more like, boy, you really want to go that far? I'm not sure we can afford that. Those are the kind of buy-in that we've had. The highlights: complete electrification of new housing being built in Maine. EV and PV conduits so that when that infrastructure can be put in, if people don't want to go that far. Enhancing system monitoring and data collection of the energy use in a much more sophisticated way than we did in the past. Let's not look at bills and how much we're paying. Let's look at energy usage and really doing a deep dive on the data collection. Our vision is net zero by 2030. That's sort of what drives my team. So super active in that area. The goal is to just keep the momentum going, and we've been blessed with the support that we've had. And also on the federal side, with our delegation, they've made critical changes to some of the funding sources that we've had that have given us even more power. And we're hoping to get one more huge federal law across the finish line that will help us out in that area. When we talk about the administration of our federal programs, we're also in the bipartisan infrastructure law, not nearly to the degree that you are, but the Weatherization Assistance Program comes from the Department of Energy. We get about $3.5 million a year in that grant. That puts out about 250, 300 homes that we're able to weatherize. This is a whole home weatherization, from an energy audit all the way through the measures, quality inspection at the end. $3 million a year has been our grant. The bipartisan infrastructure law has given us $31.2 million, 10 times. We've got 5 years to spend it. we're looking at focusing, unfortunately, it comes with all the federal garbage that comes with the DOE program, sorry. But we have to work within that construct, but now what we're trying to do is be much more impactful into multifamily housing. Most of it that we've done in the past is single family housing. We've talked about heat pumps a lot, a goal of 15,000. We will get there. We will absolutely get there. We were using a funding source that, a federal funding source that has dried up on us in a good way because we spent those funds. But last year we got a $5 million grant from DOE to keep that program going. I remember talking in the early days of the $100,000 goal and drilling down on the low income side with people saying, how are you gonna get there? And you only get this much money that you can put your hand on right now. And I said, once we start doing it, other funding sources will show up. And they are, and they have been. And then finally, what we're really got our fingers crossed in 2024 is the work that we've been doing with the Governor's Energy Office and GoPIF on the IRA funding and the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Massive ask being put forward, both for Solar for All and for the National Clean Investment Fund. EPA is putting out from a $14 billion national pot. EPA is going to make just a few awards to national groups. We have aligned ourselves with one of those national groups called Climate United. And there are others out there too. But the whole goal here is let's get as much money we can into the state of Maine, primarily working through Dan's office. And then where does Maine housing fit there and what can we do? We have our eyes on public housing infrastructure and trying to retrofit public housing projects that are been built 50, 60 years ago that are just in terrible condition. Let's see if we can retrofit those properties. And then using the Solar for All, how can we, using solar arrays to help either naturally occurring affordable housing or this existing public housing portfolio or even our new construction. So there are opportunities all over the place. We just put in front of our board, we had to put a number. We just put, well, I hope we get 25 million. Actually, I hope we get 50 or 60 or 70 million. We'll see. I think first or second quarter, we'll find out about that. So I will stop there.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. This is just the first question, so.
Yeah.
Making sure. I'll be very brief since it's the first time starting. And I got these updates from my team, which was great. So I think I think what Maine is doing with Governor Mills and what you guys are all doing in this room is so forward thinking and action driven. And so I am glad to be a part of that. With that being said, some of the wins from the last year and ongoing into 2024. Maine CDC secured a 5-year grant where you get $300,000 per year to look at and to improve Maine's resilience to the health impact of climate change. That's one. 2, we increased our ability to track and respond to using timely data to health impacts of extreme heat and extreme cold. We also improved our understanding of risk factors for extreme heat and extreme cold related illnesses through primary research. So we're contributing to the science. We supported 3 counties emergency management associations to build plans for extreme temperature, extreme events, and to support vulnerable populations. We also developed a 4-site pollen monitoring network for the state that will go live in spring of 2024. And this is in partnership with the DEP. Our drinking water program will include the statewide infrastructure vulnerability assessment to community public water systems in our next intended use plan. And I understand that we will be showing through the Maine Geological Survey well susceptibility to potential salinization, and then overlaying that on vulnerable populations so you know what the risks are. I do think all of these are really important to know and to celebrate, but I also believe some of this work highlights some of the gaps that may not be addressed in terms of the overall impact of health from climate change.
Awesome. And I will say thank you, Dr. Ball, who just has arrived in Maine this year. We're already like, how are we doing? So thank you. And he has not just arrived in Maine this year, Bruce Van Nova. He's going to bad cleanup, and he does have the most money, so he can't talk about all of it, but it's a lot of great work happening at DOT.
Yeah, given what the nature of our programs I end up having to talk at a higher level generally, but, the bill has been a, game changer for us. I mean, absolute game changer. Anybody who know, it's not like I posed for the state seal or anything, Hannah, but you know, I've been around a while and the entire time it's been, you know, trying to rub two nickels together to just put skinny mix down. I mean, that for the bulk of my career. And, you know, we'd start trying to plan a work plan and, our work planners go, how much money are we gonna have? And, what are we gonna get for a bond 3 years from now? Wow, geez, I think it's a governor legislative activity. And so, unsustainable funding was the order of the day. And, for the first time in my career, post bill and post what the legislature did last session, it's like, wow, we actually have a steady, steady for a few years, which for us is fantastic, revenue stream, and it's been a game changer. For example, just on the discretionary grant application, we get federal money for formula funds that went up by about 30%. Sounds like a lot, except inflation went up 50. Discretionary grants already since the bill, we got $250 million, $248 million. And it's often kind of not put in the same category, but we do in the same category of special federal funding. The CDS, Congressional Designated Spending line. If we get what's in the FY24 bill, which when's that gonna pass? Anybody know? We'll have a similar amount, $248 million from that. So there's $500 million. And by the way, as soon as we get it in a bill and pass committee, we start working on it. Because the funny thing about all policymakers, as soon as they vote on giving you the money, they ask you when the groundbreaking is. I mean, the next day. In fact, the day before, tell us when the groundbreaking is gonna be. So we start working on it, and that allows us to be a proactive, long-term organization. So just that whole approach allows us to deliver better. In terms of climate, a lot of what I was gonna say has been said, so I won't bother. Anna, you talked a lot about EV charging. By the way, it's the most important thing we're probably doing in trying to reduce that 49%. Electrification of the fleet and charging is probably the biggest thing we can do. Won't talk about the challenges of some of it at the federal level right now. That's the next question. We also do lots of other things that I don't think people always know. For people down at down east or in the Acadia area, we got a huge Acadia Gateway Center, Transit Center going in there. You get off, electric buses, go see the park. It's a huge transition. We apply for and got money for electric buses. We get more, we deliver more if the companies go out of business and all that kind of stuff, but that's a different thing. That's under the challenges category. The LiDAR thing is something we knew right off. The surveyor part of me just says that we're gonna need to know elevation is really good. And so that's going on. Something that we have done for a while, but now we can supercharge it is we call it our village program, our village partnership initiative. That is simply design, you know, DOT gets a reputation and just all they're worried about is, you know, laying pavement, laying stuff. By the way, very important, highway and bridge network. Electric cars use them too, just so you know. So do transit buses. So highways are not bad. Let's start with that. But once you go from the high speed to the lower speed, revamping how we're setting speed limits so that it's based on context, not just based on the 85th percentile. You know, land use matters. You start designing it human scale, not vehicular scale. And that's a whole different game-changing type thing. We've done it before, by the way. You don't have to go far from around here. If you walk down in Hollowell, that was us. By the way, they're unbelievably tough projects to deliver because every business owner wants to know how high their curve is, whether it's going to be granite, but they're unbelievably meaningful because instead of just focus on you can get there from here, you got to make the there people a place people want to be. And if you do that, housing follows. And if you do that, density follows. And if you do that, so the village program, the easiest way is just talk about examples that we've already delivered, and there's a lot more coming. Hollowell, Little Belgrade Village by the lakes, when you go up there, that's a whole different kind of feel. That's a different way to go about it. You go up 302, look at Naples. Look at Bridgeton. Those are villages. And we have a bunch in the queue that this discretionary program allows us to apply for the money to build them, because they're very expensive. We like to know cost per unit on everything. There's no cost per unit on a village. I know they're at least 5 million. We cap them at 15, and they're somewhere in between. So that's a big kind of game changer in terms of that is at the intersection of housing, transportation, and help people live. Active transportation. We're taking a much more aggressive approach of how can we use rail corridors that have been in disuse for decades. Maybe that's a good active transportation. That is not easy. Rail advocates really don't like that idea, but others on balance do. So we're working on that. And the biggest thing, as I said last time around, this is like the biggest transformational thing. Windport. A windport. I mean, it will be, and people are usually given a reputation of focus on, widgets and delivering highway bridge projects. I say that'll be the most important thing I ever work on. And it's not that complicated to understand in the big picture. If we need offshore wind is coming, federal water, it's coming. The only way Maine can reap any of the economic benefits is to have a port. Or you can have that someplace else and let someone else reap the economic benefits, and then they'll pull them out there, and then they'll be out there. But following up on Pat and I have talked about it. It has to be done in a way that doesn't, harm our, ruin a legacy industry. I have this theory: if you're on the state seal, you're pretty safe. There's a fisherman out there, and so working on that. So all those things, there's a lot more. I couldn't do it without Joyce and the whole team of people. And by the way, they like building this stuff. The idea that what the hell are we doing this for? It's more like, oh geez, we get to do this too. So it's a great thing. It's been transformational.
Awesome. I'm getting the hook, look. But I'm gonna challenge the panel to a one-liner. Hard. Of a barrier to our implementation work in your area. And I'm gonna look, just one sentence, Dan Brennan, you get to kick it off.
How about one word?
Sure.
Workforce.
Okay, good. Kate?
Integrative planning.
Highly complicated, but excellent.
All right, ask her turn to do 3 words now.
Ongoing funding.
Nice.
Bruce?
Speechless.
It is expectations, both setting expectations up front with clarity, but then there has to be patience in implementation. It took us 150 years to get into this mess. It's going to take us some time to get out of it, but we will. The hardest part is starting. That's happening. Now let's set a realistic goal and go there.
Dr. Ross, sorry to give you the impossible last word.
Last word?
Last words, words.
Thank you, good, I'll take those words. With that being said, I mentioned those highlights. The gaps and challenges that I feel for the working groups is to really connect it back to the health of the population. One of the challenges for public health is that we have a reduced workforce, a stressed out workforce, and reduced support and funding actually. And so how do you bolster surveillance of both communicable diseases and the impact of climate change in terms of extreme events? How do you bolster our ability to contain and mitigate when these diseases become more apparent to our communities and to us? How do you support and monitor for the impacts of behavioral mental health that comes along with climate change, which I have not heard? And so if I could do anything, I just want to see those thoughts, and I would love to hear more from the work groups about them.
Great, excellent.
Well done. I would say a lot.
All right, so David, how long do we have?
I would say you've got 15, 20 minutes.
Okay, all right, I'm just
With
gonna.
the encouragement to 15.
All right. I'm gonna say I find it ironic that the focus of this panel is on approaching challenges. And that I'm going to be encouraging the panelists to talk about some of the things that are such difficult topics in the realm of climate action strategies that we often don't really talk about them all that much. We sort of put them aside as too difficult to try to come up with a solution to. And so that's gonna be our lightning round. So all of our working groups are going to be faced with trying to grapple with some of these things, where we have strategies that when you think about one particular problem you're trying to solve, you come up with a strategy, but that strategy may seem to really fly in the face of other statewide priorities that we have. And so how do we, as a council, how do our working groups try to grapple with those things and find that balance between potentially competing priorities? Now, what I would say is that as we're entering our work, we're going to talk about this today. And I would encourage all of you not to shy away from talking about these things, but to keep in mind that you aren't going to have to solve all of those problems either, right? So last time around, we came up with a lot of strategies where we had no money to pull it off. And we decided we still need to recognize those as important strategies. We'll put them in the plan and then we'll have to figure out how we fund it. Lo and behold, now there's all this funding. So there will be things that are difficult to grapple with. There are some strategies that we may not have all the best answers to, but we should think about including those in this part of this planning process. So I'm going to combine our two questions into one because we won't have time to do them separately. So I would like for each of the panelists to discuss some of the challenges you recognize when considering climate actions, where multiple priorities may produce conflicting strategies, and to say that there are differing needs and opportunities in each of our individual communities in Maine. So how can the state help our communities choose climate actions that are right for their residents and that then also support our larger statewide goals? I'll start with Dan.
Okay, thanks. I was just thinking about what you're saying, reflecting on this morning. I think I'm gonna start on an optimistic tone. I know this is a challenges panel, but I'm an optimist, and I think it's important to recognize that, but for the first time in at least my professional career, and I think recognizing that we have the technologies, we have this challenge of climate change when we have the technologies available to solve that challenge at a time when costs of those technologies are going down and federal incentives and marketplaces are going towards that. So it feels like to me, from an optimistic perspective, we have the opportunity to meet the challenges before us. I think the challenge with that, and you hear the federal government talk about this or other folks, is that we need to deploy things, right? We need to build things. We need to build solar, wind, batteries, biomass, all of these. We need electric vehicles. We need heat pumps. So we need to build things. That comes with decision points, and for others, we need to. Where are these going to be cited, right? What policies do we have? How are we balancing kind of land use, habitat mitigation, all of these things with where these projects need to be cited? How are we thinking about the affordability of these technologies for both people and our economies, where we have the technologies, but we need to make sure we've got the policies in place to make sure that they're affordable. And then we also have real reliability challenges as a region. We have regional opportunities to work with the other states on planning on all of that work, but we need to make sure that we have an energy system that's reliable and affordable. And one thing which we learned last winter or 2 winters ago, over the last 2 winters, is that while we have really ambitious heat pump goals, we also have fuels that are no longer being produced at the same level they used to be. And I'll just kind of talk a little bit about this, where we realized much more seriously than maybe prior years that kerosene is a really important fuel for a number of reasons. It's jet fuel, basically, but it also goes into if you have an outdoor oil tank, what is keeping that from freezing, right? And so as we were looking at global energy markets before, we realized as the most home heating oil reliant state in the country, it wasn't just about heating oil, it was about kerosene. There were kerosene shortages before. And the folks that have outdoor heating tanks are folks that, may be living in a mobile home and maybe least, maybe most impacted. So you have a high price fuel that's hard to get. And we had to kind of put our heads down and figure out how are we working on this together. And so as we think about the transition, we need to think about not just about where we're going, but how to deal with the impacts of that transition, which, for example, fuel, which, we hadn't paid a lot of attention to before that may be going away. And so I'm an optimist. I think that, if we can give our communities resources and work with them and provide guidance and empower them to do that, especially thinking about all the federal opportunity that we'll get there. But yeah, that's my 2-minute spiel.
That's great. Thanks, Dan. Judy.
So the frame that I put this in my mind is that there are varying timescales that we're dealing with here and accelerating timescales. So we have the inevitability of sea level rise on a relatively long timescale, really, even though it's amazingly fast geologically. We also, though, have very abrupt and unpredictable and increasingly severe risk associated with more intense storms. And humans are not especially good at dealing with either of those things. We put it off. We think that won't happen to me, that big thing, or that's later. And I don't really feel it just yet. So when you combine the fact that those timescales are happening with the risks that we're facing, like saltwater intrusion, flooding, surge, habitat loss, and so on, in areas of risk where the property tax value is the highest that the towns take in. And so it's very significant to them what happens, both in terms of a revenue stream and then if there's devastation, what they have to pay for. You have property ownership that is a legacy of a connection to a place that goes back generations and is held close in order to pass on to the next generation, and is also someone's likely livelihood, their most significant asset. You see, it's extraordinarily fraught and intense in terms of where people live with it. And then we have in-migration and subdivision pressures associated with and housing need associated with where the market is at right now and in-migration from other parts of the country where the demand is greatest along the coast. And there's no walking into that situation with just a simple technical answer or the answer. And so what I'm putting forth is not that I've got the answers, but that the approach, I love the title of this, Approaching Challenges. Started out as sticky issues. I think that's good too. But how do we approach this challenge? I think we have to do so certainly with humility and with really skilled facilitation and relying on the social scientists among us to help communities tackle these issues in a way that keeps us from our tendency toward polarization, and it's either this or that, because the answers here are multifaceted, extend over time, will work for a while now, but need to change later, and are going to be different in different urban and rural settings across the coast of Maine. So I guess I think I'm being brief here. In saying that we need to step into this carefully and with good, really good facilitation and respect for helping communities work through these issues when they just don't want to, because it's hard.
Thanks, Judy. And I think you've highlighted some of what has come up a little bit in our, little offshoot groups and over the course of the day, and that we've heard before is that, we have many of our local communities that are under-resourced to deal with so many of these issues, and trying to find the right role of the state in helping to support municipalities make those local decisions for their citizens. So with that, Noel.
So I mentioned already that we represent older adults in conversations as especially around issues that have a direct or indirect impact on them. And often the way we approach that is when we try to decide what policies we work on and what we don't, at the end of the day, we try to evaluate and see if that issue is a pocketbook issue for an older adult. And so when it comes to climate change and climate goals, we ask the question, are there going to be any unintended consequences? And is some of this work going to create a pocketbook issue for older adults? And we know that climate change is going to have an adverse impact on older adults because many of them get displaced. Many of them who choose to age in place are unable to do that. Even those who choose to stay there in spite of adversity don't have the same quality of life that they could and they should. And are entitled to, especially if they've helped build that community for decades. And so there's a very direct impact on older adults. Having said that, when we look at the many different ways that climate change could have, other unintended consequences, when we look at, one of the things we say is when we create policy around climate change, we want to make sure that the policies are transparent, that they truly meet the needs of all consumers and older adults, definitely. And again, sometimes when I'm using the term older adults, I'm also talking to people who are living on fixed and low income. Because older adults often have to take the tough choice, make the tough decision between, are they taking their prescription drugs, all of it that they're supposed to for the day? Or are they paying the electric bills? Are they going to eat the meal, or they're going to split it up so that they can have part of the meal today and part of the meal tomorrow? And that's reality for many Mainers, particularly in our state. I don't need to tell you guys that we're not a very wealthy state, and we have a lot of older adults who live on very, very small annual income. And so when we look at some of this unintended consequences, some of the utility costs actually become a really significant thing. And again, another unintended consequence is when people depend on electric utility so much, sometimes it could, put them in a situation where they might die because they're not able to heat their homes enough during the winter or cool it enough in the summertime. And those extreme temperatures can actually impact their health and well-being directly. So when they depend on electricity, and we as a state, or any state for that matter, commit to certain goals, how do those goals then have unintended consequences on all of us? When we give subsidies and spread those subsidies, for all ratepayers, and some ratepayers actually really afford to take another, $7 or $8 to their monthly bill, right? They truly cannot. And we hear stories time and again from members and older adults across the state, especially when we're at the Common Ground Fair, when we're in different places, coming up to us and telling us, I'm not a member, but what are you doing about this, right? And it truly is a very entitled position, and we want them to be able to do that. But it's one of those areas where we think it'd be great for us to really evaluate and see. And that's why one of the things that we brought up here, we talked about, is auditing our goals for any unintended consequences that further inequities, right? So I'm hoping that we will keep that at front and center in all the conversations that we have, especially as we build this plan and work together, because I think we can get to the other side of it by being creative. And someone mentioned it, maybe it was you, Kate, we actually live in a state that's very collaborative, that's very core, and I'm really hopeful that we can do that. So stop there.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And I like how you ended on hope as well. So I'm gonna turn it back over to David. There he is.
So, we're kind of at the end here. There was one little conversation we wanted to have. And I wonder if I'm good enough to put the slides back up here. Wonder if,
Molly says you are.
let's see if we got the skills here. Give me one second. Wonder if the slide that I want is here.
It is there. Let's keep going.
Yeah, let me circle back here. But in any case, what we want, the final conversation before lunch in the end, because their lunch actually is right next door and you can bring it in and sit and continue the conversation. So here we go. This is what we want to talk about. How we want to work together. And I had this whole plan where we're going to have a nice little conversation about it. We really don't have time. So let's just cut to the chase, right? Which is we're going to need to work well together, right? As a council. And you should all know the general flow of things, right? Where the working groups are going off now in the winter into the spring. And we'll be coming back in June and presenting their recommendations to you as a council in June, right? So you've got work as a council to sort of get yourself ready for receiving those recommendations and also involving yourself in the working group work over the winter into the spring, okay? Then comes June, we'll get these recommendations. The summer comes where GoPIFs and some of you will be helping us sort of, how do you pull all this together in something that looks like a draft? And then in the fall, starting September, we kick into high gear as a council, right? And we're gonna have to make sense of all this stuff that comes in from the working groups and try to turn it into a coherent update of Maine won't wait. And that's where this slide comes in, right? This slide comes in that moment in the fall in particular, right? Where we're trying to make sense of a lot of things that come in and work through some of the issues that this panel was starting to get into, right? And we're gonna need to work in a way that hopefully allows us on December 1st to say, as a council, we're on board with this, right? That's why we use the word consensus here. I recognize consensus is a tough word, right? We've talked about how this is an issue that can tend to polarization. There are issues within this issue that can tend to polarization. So we're gonna put that out there as saying, we know it's more powerful if at the end of the day, you as a council, because that leads to more expeditious implementation, things that happen on the back end, right? In that, I put this secret sauce. I think it is kind of the secret sauce of Maine won't wait. One of the things, which was the council was on board, a lot of stuff happened. It was the implementation of Maine won't wait that made it a great plan. Okay, so what does it mean? We're gonna have to be listening to each other on these tricky issues. We're gonna have to be solving for each other's core interests and needs, particularly if we're representing certain interests on this council. And we're gonna have to work creatively in those conversations to see if there are pathways on these tricky issues that make sense for all of us, and we can all live with it, right? There's a couple escape valves here. One is if there's a specific issue within this update that we're just struggling to find, everybody on board with, we can create an annex to the document, and we didn't have to do this last time, but we can do it if we need to this time, where we can capture some of those different views, right? So folks can say, I'm not on board with it, but I'm gonna make sure my view is captured in this annex so folks know that I'm not on board with this aspect of the plan. That's an escape valve that we have. I just want to name that. The ultimate escape valve is if we need to vote on this thing, we can, right? So I just want to put that out there. Like, this is not like, if we're not 100% unanimity, like with the guitar and kumbaya, right? It's okay, right? We're going to be okay. And so this is the view. I welcome Hannah and Melanie. If there's anything else you want to say about the spirit of how we want to work together, we can take a few lightning rounds of reactions to it, but I just want to sort of put it out there to start our thinking, like particularly September into finishing up the update. We're going to need to be thinking about this kind of stuff.
No, I think you've said it well and reflects how we worked last time around. A lot of you are the same, but a lot of you are new. And so I think the one thing that's important is that we actually keep talking. I mean, there were concerns. I mean, there were things Pat and I talked about. We all sort of, we sort of started to name those areas that were difficult and how do we work through them and can we find agreement? Because we want this plan to be something that diverse interests can believe in. And there are gonna be areas that are gonna be easy and positive and who doesn't want to create jobs? And then there are other areas that are more challenging that we're gonna have to wrestle, but it's, I mean, I think what David is saying, it is okay to disagree. But I think everyone is coming into this with a spirit of how can we make progress? So if you decide you're not there, I mean, we're all gonna just stare at you and poke at you, but I do, everyone is around this table looking to advance this and bring diverse perspectives about how we make progress on things that are hard, so.
That's great, yeah.
I would just add, I think if you look at Maine Won't Wait, you'll see some things that are very specific, but a lot of the strategies and goals are a little bit higher level. And so I think what we found is that sometimes when you get too far into the weeds is where it's much harder to reach agreement. And so when you find yourselves in that place, think about sort of taking that step back up to that next level where you can agree in concept on what is the outcome you're trying to achieve, because maybe it's not going to be a very specific policy measure that you can reach agreement on, but you're likely going to be able to agree on what kind of outcome or goal you want to see as that outcome. So I think we saw that last time around in the planning cycle, that we had a lot of success with saying, let's step back from that point of contention and talk about what it is we're really trying to achieve here. And then that became the thing that was actually articulated in the plan.
Yeah,
I think we sacrifice credibility if we don't have that opportunity for a minority report or viewpoint, so I'm glad to hear that. I don't disagree with what Melanie just said, but at some point in time, if something's controversial, it ought to be able to be in there, because consensus is not real life, and at least in the municipal world.
Yes, we know. Right.
Oh, you got Amara's hand there.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add, I think it would be, I know our agenda, for these meetings are super tight. And also just the community building aspect we did in the beginning was really helpful in understanding where people are coming from. And I think heading into some really tough and hard conversations, even if it's just like 10 minutes for check-ins to go around, see how everyone's doing. I want to learn, like, what is your favorite pie or something like that, some random question. I think will be helpful in building communities so that we can work through those differences and better understand our unique perspectives.
Glad you said that. Glad you said that. Other quick reflections on this. Again, we're gonna be working on this into the early part of 2024, and particularly over the summer and into the fall. But other quick reflections, like concerns you have, Gary said, things you want to push back on to make sure, yeah.
I'm not sure it's a concern, it's just a process question, and I came midway last year in my first term. And so a lot of good work had been done already, and so I came in kind of when the presentations were happening. And I'm wondering if some of the work groups are going to be working now. It kind of feels like we will be working in silos a little bit. At what point before we get to June or the fall, can we kind of get a peek into what's happening? So if there's any input we can give, we can be on all the subcommittees, right? So is there any way we could have that kind of,
I mean, I
check-in from time to
think
time?
it's a good suggestion. You'll see our spring agenda, and I mean, I think a lot of the co-chairs are represented in this room, and so I think it would be good. They sort of try to share where they think they're going. And they might be able to share sort of midway through where they are going. And I will say many of you are on working groups. Feel free to bring those thoughts back. And others actually like you are also thinking about this from a broader equity perspective, which really requires tracking what's happening across all of the groups. So we'll keep you posted, but I think that's an excellent suggestion.
Yeah. Other things that folks want to bring up before we finish up today? Yeah.
One thing that I thought worked well last round, and this is not to shut out anyone, and it's a lot to track from the working groups, and a number of the associations, NGOs kind of pulled points together, so there could be more of a comprehensive, because we're distributed through different working groups, and it's an opportunity for us to have those conversations now as opposed to waiting till
September.
the spring, September.
Yeah.
So we can think about that as
Right, so as organizations, you can help to do that and actually have conversations with your constituencies about it. That's what you're saying,
other.
and with our. Great, all right, well, I'll take that on as a challenge of how we weave that into the next 6 months. Even before you get the June download from the working groups. Okay. All right, anything else? Yeah.
Last time, because of COVID, we were all virtual, we didn't have an opportunity until the summer after the working group recommendations to do what became more robust public involvement than we were able to do. And so I haven't heard today yet how we're going to get more involved, public involvement beforehand or as we work. Any thoughts on that?
So glad you asked that. And there are people to answer that.
I mean, it's a great question, Judy, and I think it's a complicated but multi-layered answer. I mean, I think last time around, we spent so much time with David coming up with the most exciting tour of the state where we involved everyone, and then COVID hit, and then we're like, okay, what are we gonna do now? And we engaged a lot of people online. That's not the same. So I would say our office has put out an RFP for a consultant, and I don't think I can say who it is yet, but that's actually gonna work with the Climate Council to engage a variety of people across the state, sort of broadly in our climate plan, especially those who are least likely to give us input, who are don't pay lobbyists, don't have time to come to meetings. We're also working with every working group, including yours, of how you specifically reach out to the stakeholders who are gonna be impacted by the recommendations you make. And I don't know, my wheels are turning a little bit about optional, climate council field trips, of how we can all just sort of, we spent so much time staring at our computers, and there was we were very focused. We were stuck at home. What else were we gonna do other than come up with a climate plan? But I actually think there may be opportunities for us to all go out and see a little bit more of both climate impacts and companies and communities who are doing stuff. I think Bob's offered to take every one of us lobster fishing next summer.
Let's go look in this winter.
Okay, so but I will just say we will share with the council in much more detail, and a lot of it is happening at the working group level. This climate plan will be informed by hundreds, if not thousands more people, like hopefully having meaningful conversations compared to the last one with the help of all of you, but other consultants and other organizations in a pretty, I would honestly say, complicated way, because we're trying to do it as well as humanly possible. And the Environmental Protection Agency is giving us additional funding to go out and do it well. So
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think it's been frustrating not to be able to say more about that, in part because you're identifying that organization that's going to be doing some of the work with community-based organizations. Once that's all sorted out, we look forward to really laying it out with all of you, what this could look like in the coming months. Okay. Super, I think it's lunchtime. Did I forget anything?
The next slide.
There's another slide? Oh, yeah. You wanna talk about that, Hannah? You want me to?
go for it.
Okay, those are the dates. Those are the dates. Right? So we're gonna be doing some Zooming in between, and then we're gonna invest in person in June, when we have the big come together with all the working groups. We're gonna really try to make that feel interactive and not just like a total data dump. So that's on us to figure out to make that a great in-person event in June. And then we'll get back together in November for sure in person. And I'm liking what Hannah's putting on the table, which is perhaps in between these, we figure out ways to get together in a more sort of field trippy way. So that, I think that's.
Let's do something in honor of Sherry Huber, a forest products tour.
Sure.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Right?
Show you.
Something like that.
So volunteers welcome. I will just say that our next meeting, there's a lot on the agenda. Science and Technical Subcommittee is working very hard to deliver a lot of important information and some new information that will guide the working groups. I think we are thinking about even a phased way to start sharing that with you when they are ready. And as well as having some presentation on the 14th as well. So just thank them because they've been working long before any of us. And they're definitely gonna produce the most pages of any of the subcommittees or working groups, so.
That's the plan.
Okay, is there a meeting December first after November 21?
So I just wanna say, we started looking at the calendar, Sarah Kern over there. And December 1st is a Sunday. And then we started looking the week before and it's Thanksgiving. It's a very late Thanksgiving. And so we don't want to miss the statutory goal. December 1 has been our exciting day. But then we can't bring you here on Sunday, I don't think. I mean, you love us, but so we have a very ambitious plan to deliver the climate plan, whatever this is, 9-10 days early. So this is so you can all have a relaxing Thanksgiving. We will have solved every issue 2 weeks early. That's why that date is not December 1st.
All right, lunch is next door, unless Sarah, I forgot anything? No? Okay.
So the lunch is optional. Feel free to take it. Feel free to come back and talk to each other.
Right.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.